The young blacksmith walks away from a group of disgruntled adventurers. They shout after him, complaining that their weapons are duller than before and placing the blame squarely on his shoulders. Despite their harsh words, he remains focused, adjusting the tool over his shoulder and deciding it is time to get back to work. He finds himself at the forge, the rhythmic strike of his hammer against glowing metal echoing through the workshop. As sparks dance in the air, a resolve hardens within him. He is no longer bound by anyone's expectations and intends to live freely, pursuing his craft on his own terms. This determination stems from a recent confrontation within the Wings of Glory Guild. Standing before the guild master, the young man had pleaded for a reconsideration of the overwhelming production volume, explaining that the blacksmiths simply could not keep up with the relentless stream of requests. In response to his plea, the guild master looked back with a sneer, questioning what kind of spoiled nonsense he was hearing. The man remained seated in his ornate chair, dismissively lecturing that blacksmiths merely create tools in the safety of the workshop, while adventurers are the ones truly risking their lives against monsters. He demanded the work be finished without further complaint. Hearing this, the blacksmith's hand tightened into a white-knuckled fist against his leg. It was always the same. Despite working until he was deprived of sleep, his efforts were met only with accusations of being pampered. The situation within the S-Rank Guild had become untenable, as the workshop was forced to handle not only internal manufacturing for members, but also external requests. The guild master continued to accept an unreasonable amount of work, imposing crushing quotas that ignored the physical limits of his craftsmen. He looked away, the weight of the injustice heavy in his gaze. He realized that while everyone was vocalizing their breaking points, the man in charge had no intention of listening to a single word. He stands before the guild's leadership, striking a final, desperate deal to fulfill the month's grueling production quotas in exchange for a single, personal request. Stepping forward with his meager belongings at his side, he makes his plea clear. He asks for the formal permission to forge a katana. The woman across from him pauses, her eyes narrowing as she processes the unexpected and seemingly nonsensical request. She scoffs at the notion, questioning the logic of crafting such an unpopular and fragile weapon, but he remains firm, reminding her of the specific terms established with her predecessor. With a dismissive smirk, she insists that blacksmiths should simply follow the official request forms rather than wasting time on personal whims. Her words cut deep as she brands his lifelong ambition a useless dream, urging him to abandon his pursuit of such a minor and insignificant tool. Having reached his breaking point after years of unappreciated devotion, he realizes that his path and the guild's cold priorities will never align. He finally declares his resignation, dropping the physical proof of his contract to the floor as a stunned Aina watches the bridge being burned in real time. The guild master erupts in a fit of pure rage, screaming that he is easily replaceable and warning him never to come crawling back for mercy. Ignoring the venomous shouts echoing behind him, he steps out into the quiet hallway, the heavy doors sealing shut on his former life. He stood in the center of his sparse quarters, surrounded by the remnants of a life he was discarding. Looking at the bags of refuse, he couldn't help but feel the pettiness of the situation and the weight of the years spent in this cramped space. Deciding to move forward, he began packing his essentials into a magic bag, acknowledging that his body would have eventually collapsed under the weight of a life that offered no room to breathe. The decision to leave felt less like a choice and more like a necessity for survival. Once his preparations were complete, he took a final look around the room before turning his focus toward the workshop, the place where his journey with the guild would truly end. He gripped his katana, the weight of the blade a familiar comfort as he prepared for the final farewell. Entering the large, brick-walled forge, he observed the other blacksmiths already hard at work, the air thick with the heat of the furnaces and the rhythmic sound of hammers hitting glowing metal. The artisans continued their tasks with practiced precision, unaware of the change that was about to occur in their ranks. As he moved through the workspace, he was intercepted by Torque, a fellow smith who was surprised to see him carrying his weapons and tools as if preparing for a long journey. He explained that since most of the other blacksmiths were away on an expedition, he wanted to say his goodbyes to those who remained, noting the rarity of seeing Torque so busy. Without hesitation, he delivered the news that he had decided to quit the guild that very day. Torque was immediately struck with panic, questioning what would happen to the already insane production quotas if their most capable member left, his voice rising in disbelief at the sudden announcement. He began to walk away, dismissively suggesting that there were plenty of others who could take his place, even as Torque stood frozen in disbelief, realizing the immense burden that would now fall on the rest of the team, who had barely managed to keep up even with his help. Torque desperately brought up the matter of Keed's katana, reminding him that he was the only one capable of maintaining such a specialized weapon and that she wouldn't let anyone else touch it. He simply smiled and declined, jokingly noting that he didn't want to risk being sliced up by the temperamental owner if he stayed any longer. With a final request for his former colleagues not to push themselves past their limits, he stepped through the workshop doors and into the unknown. Behind him, Torque's voice echoed through the forge, calling out his name one last time as the door swung shut. The town rests quietly under the evening sky, its timber-framed buildings casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets. He wanders the streets, his mind heavy with the weight of his sudden resignation. He pondered his next move, whether to seek out another guild or attempt the daunting task of opening his own workshop, a feat that requires a formal license. Despite his years of devotion, the end of his tenure felt jarringly sudden. Nearby, the savory aroma of grilled meat wafts from a brightly lit food stall where a burly vendor tends to his skewers over an open flame. Approaching the counter, he is greeted warmly by the vendor, who recognizes him immediately. He places an order for 2 rock bird thighs, a simple meal for a long night of contemplation. As the vendor prepares the food, he mentions to his assistant that the young man before them is the very blacksmith responsible for the exceptional edge on the knife she is currently using. Handing over the payment, he watches as the assistant marvels at the blade's sharpness, noting how effortlessly it slices through the meat. It brings him a quiet sense of satisfaction to see his craftsmanship being treated with such respect. With his meal in hand, he finds a quiet spot by a stone fountain in the center of a nearby plaza to eat in peace. He takes a bite, noting how the precise cut of the meat has preserved its juices, a testament to the quality of the tools used. However, his moment of tranquility is shattered by frantic cries from the crowd, warning of an immediate danger approaching the square. A massive, intoxicated man suddenly erupts into the plaza, swinging a heavy weapon wildly, and sending bystanders scattering in terror. Amidst the chaos, a clear, authoritative voice rings out as a member of the Night Order arrives to intercept the threat. She draws her blade and orders the brute to stand down, identifying herself as a member of the Night Order. She warns him that any further resistance will be met with force, but the man, feeling insulted and ignored, only responds with a drunken, defiant roar as he prepares to charge. She parries the brute's wild swings with practiced grace, though the sheer force of his roar echoes through the plaza. Watching from the sidelines, the young blacksmith acknowledges her prowess, noting that her movements are those of a seasoned warrior. As the two combatants circle each other, the tension in the air becomes palpable, a silent prelude to the next exchange of steel. He winces at the jarring, metallic screech of their weapons meeting, a sound that grates against his trained ears. He realizes the massive man isn't wielding his blade with any technique. He is using the longsword as a crude bludgeon, relying on weight rather than edge. If she continues to meet such heavy, improper strikes with a defensive stance, her own blade will surely reach its limit. The brute lunges again, his massive frame putting every ounce of strength into a downward cleave that forces her to brace for the impact. Suddenly, the unthinkable happens. The steel snaps with a sharp crack, leaving her staring in disbelief at the shattered remains of her family's heirloom. The pride of the Scarlet family, a blade she thought unbreakable, lies ruined in her hands. Seeing her defenseless and the thug closing in, the blacksmith leaps into the fray, his sudden movement catching the onlookers by surprise. While the vendor's assistant cries out in alarm, the old stall owner remains calm, sensing that the situation is now in capable hands. He steps firmly between the knight and her aggressor, his presence a calm anchor amidst the chaos. When the confused thug demands to know his identity, he simply reassures the stunned woman behind him, promising that everything will be handled. With a steady hand, he reaches for his own weapon, the familiar weight of the hilt grounding him as he prepares to end the confrontation. The massive man charges once more, undeterred by the new challenger, while the blacksmith waits for the perfect moment to strike, his focus narrowing to the tip of his blade. In a flash of blinding speed, he executes a single, decisive strike that cuts through the air, signaling the end of the thug's rampage. He stands calmly as the young knight stares in disbelief, her breath hitching at the sudden, overwhelming display of power that saved her life. The crowd erupts in whispers, their eyes fixed on the slender blade that effortlessly cleaved through a heavy long sword, as if it were mere parchment. With a practiced motion, he begins to return the weapon to its scabbard, the metal clicking softly against the wood. He turns his cold gaze toward the troublemaker, warning the man that if he continues to cause strife in the market, the next strike will not be so merciful. The knight, still on the ground, can only watch in awe as her savior dictates terms to the massive thug. As the townspeople move in to restrain the unruly drunk, the knight gathers herself and offers her gratitude, identifying herself as Sia Scarlet of the Lasarka Third Night Order. She checks her own broken blade, realizing the sheer difference in quality between her heirloom and his mysterious weapon. She asks for the name of her savior, hoping to properly honor the man who intervened, but he simply turns away, insisting that his intervention was nothing out of the ordinary and unworthy of such praise. Despite her pleas for him to wait, so she can offer a proper thanks and ask more questions, he continues his departure with a dismissive wave, his silhouette growing smaller as he walks away. Watching him disappear into the crowd, she wonders about his identity and the origin of his incredible skill. Nearby, the local vendor and his assistant discuss the event, revealing that the mysterious man is actually a local blacksmith, much to the knight's surprise. The memory of the strike lingers in the air, a testament to a level of craftsmanship and martial prowess that defies the logic of the common market. As he walks, he reflects on the encounter with a humble detachment, acknowledging to himself that the true strength lay not in his own hands, but in the exceptional quality of the blade he forged. He is the subject of much speculation among the workers in the courtyard. They wonder aloud what makes him so special, questioning if it is merely his unusual devotion to the katana, a weapon few others choose to master, that earned him his place, or if someone else should have been recruited in his stead. The young man, Torque, explains to a curious newcomer that the blacksmith is a man of few words who prefers to handle even the most difficult external requests entirely on his own. He warns her that she is still far too uninformed about the man she is now working alongside, despite her arrival at the forge. As they speak, the focus shifts to the philosophy behind the craft. It is revealed that he doesn't just hammer metal. He meticulously observes the individuals who will eventually wield his creations, seeking to understand their very nature before the first strike of the hammer. This dedication transforms every object he touches, from the most formidable weapons to simple kitchen knives and scissors. Under his hands, these everyday tools are elevated, becoming more than just steel. They become lifelong partners, perfectly attuned to their owner's needs. Back in the heat of the forge, he sits in quiet contemplation, the glow of the furnace illuminating his focused expression. For him, the act of creation is a solitary and sacred duty. He examines a blade with an intensity that borders on the spiritual. To him, blacksmithing is not merely a trade, but a profound connection between the maker, the tool, and the user. Standing tall with his signature weapon, he acknowledges that as the one who forges these katanas, it is only natural that he understands how to wield them with lethal precision. He knows their inherent fragility, yet he also knows that in the right hands, they possess the power to shatter a long sword with a single, well-placed strike. His motivation is simple yet deep. He loves the katana and wishes to spend his life perfecting the art. He finds a singular beauty in a carefully honed blade, believing that every strike of his hammer must be for the ultimate benefit of the one who will carry it, just as it was in the days of his youth. This philosophy was born years ago, rooted in the lessons of his past. He can still hear the guiding voice of his father, urging him to listen and, more importantly, to imagine. In the memory of his childhood forge, his father taught him that a true smith must envision the user, the size of their hands, the strength of their grip, and the reach of their swing. Inspired by this legacy, the young boy vowed to one day forge a blade that would surpass even his father's greatest work, creating tools that draw out the absolute best in those who use them. He stands in quiet contemplation, reflecting on the mastery he has attained. Looking back at the foundations of his training, the young blacksmith realizes that his current skills have finally reached the level necessary to forge a path entirely his own. As he prepares to depart, he weighs the merits of the quiet life ahead. A small village blessed with clean water, a nearby mine for raw materials, and a peaceful population. Free from the stifling bureaucracy and arbitrary customs of the guild, he feels a surge of confidence that he can truly succeed. With a final look at the horizon, he resolves to return to the place where it all began. The blacksmith's journey now takes a turn toward the countryside, marking the start of a new chronicle for the man who crafts the soul of the blade. Accompanied by his loyal companions, he leaves the city's shadow behind to seek a simpler, more meaningful existence. Ahead of them lies a future of new encounters and the slow building of a legacy. With a faint, determined smile, he sets his sights on the village of his memories, ready to face whatever challenges arise as he transforms from a mere craftsman into a legendary figure. After a long and arduous journey, the young traveler finally reaches his destination. He looks out over the familiar landscape of Foka Village, a place he hasn't seen in years. A wave of nostalgia washes over him as he reflects on the month-long trek by horse-drawn carriage from the bustling city of Lasarka. He is finally home, back where he was born and raised. He approaches a sturdy wooden house and raps his knuckles against the door. The sound echoes through the quiet village air, signaling his arrival to those within. When the door opens, an elderly man peers out, his eyes clouded with confusion at the sight of the tall stranger. The young man introduces himself as Sig, prompting a sudden realization from the village chief. The old man's face lights up with joy as he marvels at how much the boy has grown, barely recognizing the man standing before him. Once inside, the atmosphere turns serious as the chief reacts with utter disbelief to the news. He shouts in surprise, unable to fathom why such a talented individual would choose to walk away from a prestigious guild position and quit his job. He remains calm, his gaze drifting toward the window where two young women pass by, unaware of the heavy conversation taking place. He begins to explain the circumstances that led to his departure, his voice steady and resolute. He details how the guild's rigid policies stifled his craft, forcing him to fulfill endless mundane requests while strictly forbidding him from forging the katanas he truly desired. The mismatch between his passion and their bureaucracy had become an unbearable burden that he could no longer carry. His eyes burn with a newfound determination as he speaks of his ultimate goal, to forge a blade that surpasses even his father's greatest works. He believes that only here, in the quiet solitude of his hometown, can he truly focus on creating his masterpiece. The chief listens intently, warning him that the remote countryside offers few customers who could truly appreciate or afford such high-quality work. Undeterred, the young blacksmith admits he is well aware of the risks, stating that as long as he can make a modest living while focusing on the craft he loves, it will be more than enough. He listens intently as the elder offers him the chance to reclaim his family's legacy, inviting him to move back into his old home and workshop. With a grateful smile, the young man accepts, prompting the chief to remark on how much he resembles his father. Continuing the conversation, the chief explains that the current village blacksmith is aging and asks if he would be willing to step into the role. It is a significant request, one that would tie him permanently to the village's daily life. He accepts the responsibility without hesitation, confidently listing the various tools and blades he is capable of forging to support the community. The elder is visibly relieved and excited, knowing that having a former member of an S-rank guild as their blacksmith is a boon beyond measure. Watching the young man, the chief reflects on how much he has grown. The boy who once could only manage to sharpen basic tools has returned as a man of remarkable reliability. Embarrassed by the reminder of his clumsy beginnings, he quickly asks the elder to let those old memories rest. After leaving the chief, he makes his way through the overgrown path to find his family home still standing despite the years of neglect. The sight of the weathered structure brings a wave of nostalgia as he pushes through the brush. Stepping inside, he finds the workshop exactly as it was left, though now draped in thick layers of dust and cobwebs. He stands in the center of the room, taking in the silent forge and the tools that once belonged to his father. The familiar scent of iron and charcoal still lingers in the air, though he notices his father's katana is missing from its usual place. As he begins to open the windows to clear the stale air, a thick cloud of dust triggers a fit of coughing, forcing him to work through the grime. Despite the mess, he is comforted to see the furniture remains unchanged, sparking memories of being scolded for tracking dirt inside as a child. Determined to restore the place, he begins hauling the old rugs and items outside to be cleaned properly. While working outdoors, he is interrupted by the arrival of two young women who watch him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Noticing their striking resemblance, he wonders if they are sisters before offering a friendly greeting to ease their wariness. She and her sister approach as he introduces himself as Sig, explaining his return to the village after 15 years and his official permission from Chief Barris to occupy the home. In response, the sisters explain they had spotted him earlier at the chief's residence and felt compelled to offer a proper welcome to their new neighbor. The elder sister introduces herself as Liliana and her younger sibling as Atra, noting that they sustained themselves through farming and hunting in the surrounding area. He is visibly impressed by their self-sufficiency at such a young age, but Liliana's attention quickly shifts to the state of the house, noting the daunting amount of cleaning required and offering their assistance. Though he is initially hesitant to accept such a generous offer, she insists that it is their day off and they are more than happy to help him settle in. Accepting their kindness, he allows them to join him, and the three of them begin the arduous task of restoring the dusty interior. As they work, he employs a magic circle to effortlessly gather the accumulated grime, a display of power that leaves the sisters in awe and prompts Liliana to wonder about the true nature of their new neighbor. With the combined effort and a touch of magic, the once dilapidated room is transformed into a pristine living space, and they celebrate their success with a cheer. Grateful for their hard work, he expresses his sincere thanks and proposes making something special for them as a token of his appreciation. When he reveals his profession as a blacksmith, the young Atra tilts her head in confusion, having never heard the term before. She gazes in awe at the unsheathed blade, its edge gleaming with a dangerous beauty. Eiji cautions her, explaining that a blacksmith is someone who crafts such weapons and demonstrates the proper way to handle the steel. After showing her the sword, he asks if there are any other tools they might need for their daily chores, offering his skills for more than just weaponry. Her eyes light up with a specific request. She asks if he can craft kitchen knives, specifically one just like her sister's. She explains her heartfelt motivation, revealing a desire to help her older sister with the cooking, much to Mary's surprise. Mary admits that the knives they currently own are sized for adults, making them cumbersome and difficult for her to use effectively. Eiji listens intently, moved by the young girl's selfless ambition. Seeing the hesitation, the young girl's expression falters, and she quietly asks if her request is too much, while her sister worries about the safety of a child handling such a sharp tool. He chuckles warmly at their bond and settles the matter by promising to forge 2 knives as a housewarming gift, dismissing Mary's polite protests. With joyful shouts of gratitude, the 2 sisters wave goodbye and head back home, leaving him alone in his new workshop. As darkness settles over the village, the day's labor finally catches up to him, yet he finds his hands moving of their own accord, instinctively laying out his smithing tools on the workbench. Despite the deep exhaustion weighing on his limbs and the lack of sleep, he realizes he cannot fight his own nature. The call of the forge is too strong, and he prepares to begin his work using the materials he carried with him. He reflects on his unconventional methods, recalling how the pressure of the guild forced him to integrate magic into his blacksmithing. While traditional craftsmen might scoff at the shortcut, the efficiency it granted him was undeniable, allowing him to surpass his previous limits and improve at a rate far beyond his initial struggles. Utilizing this magical aid, he pushes the forge to a blistering 800 degrees and begins the delicate process of welding steel to the base metal. He carefully applies borax and iron oxide to the heated surface before rhythmically hammering the materials together, his brow glistening with sweat from the intense heat of the workshop. Once the base metal and steel are fully bonded, he continues to work the glowing mass, stretching and shaping it into the recognizable form of a knife. In the quiet of the night, the young smith takes a moment to sit and watch the dancing flames of the hearth, finding a profound sense of liberation in practicing his craft without the looming deadlines of the guild. Wiping the perspiration from his forehead, he takes a deep breath as the physical toll of the labor begins to manifest. Returning to the anvil, he uses his tongs to manipulate the white-hot metal, a sight he has witnessed countless times. He does not grow weary of the repetition, instead finding himself more deeply connected to the process than ever before. The more he gazes into the heart of the fire and the glowing steel, the more captivated he becomes by the transformation taking place, deciding that the moment is right to proceed. As the intensity of the work subsides, he suddenly blinks and looks around the room, his confusion growing as he notices that large pieces of furniture have been moved and stacked haphazardly during his trance-like state. He realizes with a start that his total absorption in the task, fueled by a dangerous mix of fatigue and excitement, led him to lose control of his output. Looking down at the finished blade, he understands that he has created something far too potent to be given away as a simple gift, acknowledging the danger of his own unchecked talent and the risks of working while so exhausted. He takes a moment to center himself within the quiet confines of the workshop, the cool night air pressing against the heat of the forge. His thoughts turn to the young Atra, specifically the small size of her hands contrasted against the strength that seems far beyond her years. Realizing the lethality of the blade he is crafting, he he decides that a sheath is an absolute necessity for her safety. With a deep breath, he settles into a calm rhythm, knowing that haste would only ruin the delicate balance of the metal. While he continues his meticulous labor, a different conversation unfolds among the seasoned warriors of the town. Rumors spread like wildfire that the quality of weapons supplied by the guild has plummeted, leaving those who risk their lives on the front lines feeling vulnerable and betrayed. The adventurers grumble about the guild's negligence, demanding better equipment for their dangerous trade. This growing unrest serves as a stark backdrop to his own dedication. In a nearby room, the toll of their shared efforts is visible. Papers and diagrams are strewn across the floor, and young Atra has finally drifted off to sleep, exhausted by the day's events. The young blacksmith arrives at a sunlit doorway, where a graceful woman greets him with a warm smile. She inquires if he is indeed the new craftsman in town, the one specializing in katanas who has recently taken up residence nearby. He confirms his identity with a polite nod, his presence marked by the heavy bundle he carries. She introduces herself as Cynthia, the mother of the two young girls he has already met, Liliana and Atra. In return, he offers his own name, Sig, maintaining a respectful and professional demeanor as they stand in the threshold of her home. Because she had heard of his work, she mentions the kitchen knives he was commissioned to make for her daughters, noting how much they have been looking forward to receiving them. To her surprise, he reveals that the task is already complete, holding out the carefully wrapped package as proof of his efficiency. The woman's eyes widen in disbelief as she looks at the bundle, questioning how he could have finished them so quickly when only a single night has passed since the request. He simply confirms that they are ready, his expression calm despite her obvious amazement at his speed. Stepping inside the house, he is immediately greeted by the sound of light footsteps as the two sisters rush into the room. They call out his name with excitement, their faces lighting up at the sight of the visitor and the promise of what he brings. He presents the gifts, handing one to each sister and specifying which belongs to Atra and which to Liliana. The girls are overcome with joy, their voices overlapping as they express their gratitude and eagerness to put the new tools to use. They carefully draw the blades from their sheaths, marveling at the craftsmanship and the unexpected quality of the protective covers. A hush falls over the room as they examine the fine edges, their initial excitement replaced by a focused, silent appreciation for the blacksmith's skill. Observing their sudden quietness, he begins to worry, wondering if the lack of an immediate verbal reaction means they are disappointed. He tentatively asks if the knives are not to their liking, unaware that his work has simply left them speechless. He watches with a sense of relief as the tension in the room dissolves into pure admiration. Liliana confesses she was simply mesmerized by the beauty of the blade, while Ag admits he is glad the gift was well received. Seeing the girls' enthusiasm, Cynthia suggests a practical test, proposing they use the new tools to chop some daikon radish. Atra is eager to start, while Liliana remains struck by the fact that she has never seen such a beautiful kitchen knife before. The young girl immediately steps up to the task, but her excitement leads to a heavy-handed approach. He quickly interjects, warning her that she is applying far too much force for such a sharp instrument. Despite the warning, the blade glides through the vegetable with startling ease, leaving the group momentarily stunned. The sheer efficiency of the cut catches them off guard, proving the exceptional quality of the smith's work. Concerned for her safety, he leans in to ensure she hasn't injured herself in the process. He gently instructs her to let the natural weight of the knife do the work rather than forcing the blade down. As both sisters begin to use their respective knives, the kitchen is filled with the sound of clean, effortless slicing. He watches them work, asking for their honest feedback on the balance and feel of the tools he crafted specifically for them. Liliana pauses, her curiosity piqued by how perfectly the handle fits her grip despite him never taking formal measurements. He smiles, revealing that he had actually gathered all the necessary data during their very first handshake. He explains that his experience as a blacksmith allows him to read a person's bone structure and muscle development just by touch. This revelation leaves the sisters in awe, and they offer their heartfelt thanks, deeply moved by the care put into their gifts. Overwhelmed with joy, Atra clutches the sheathed knife to her chest, promising to treasure it forever. Seeing such genuine happiness from his clients brings a profound sense of satisfaction to his heart, validating his efforts as a craftsman. This moment of direct connection stands in stark contrast to his past experiences within the guild. Back then, orders were merely papers passed from one department to another, devoid of the personal gratitude that now fuels his passion. He contemplates the essence of his work, believing that a blade holds the very soul of its creator. In his mind's eye, he revisits the days when he could see the faces of those who wielded his steel, allowing him to refine his craft based on their needs. It was a time of genuine joy and connection that he deeply misses. This sense of purpose began to erode as his reputation grew and the world changed around him. Eventually, the production of katanas was outlawed, and as his fame reached its peak, the opportunities to meet his clients face-to-face vanished. He felt his passion withering away in the shadow of his own success and the cold demands of mass production. Sensing his sudden melancholy, Liliana softly asks if something is troubling him. He quickly masks his introspection with a gentle smile, assuring her that his silence was merely born of a quiet contentment with his current life. He elaborates on his newfound perspective, explaining that his true desire is to remain connected to the people who rely on his work. To him, the sight of a satisfied customer is the greatest reward a craftsman can receive, far outweighing the hollow prestige of his past life in the guild. Encouraged by his warmth and openness, she hesitatingly asks if he would be open to another request, her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and uncertainty. She reveals her need for specialized arrowheads, explaining that her late father, a skilled hunter who succumbed to an epidemic, had passed his knowledge down to her. Despite her efforts, she admits she has struggled to live up to his legacy, hoping that his skill might bridge the gap between her technique and her results. He readily accepts the challenge, but requests to see her equipment first to ensure a perfect fit. To better understand the requirements of the task, he asks her to demonstrate her archery skills in the open air. Stepping outside, she draws her bow with practiced ease and releases a shot, the arrow thudding firmly into a nearby tree trunk. While her aim is true, he notes that her physical strength is insufficient to bring down larger game with standard gear. She explains her dilemma, asking if he could forge a blade that is lighter and easier for her to handle, yet retains the incredible piercing power she witnessed in his previous work. He nods in understanding, already visualizing the metallurgical solution to her problem. He promises to begin the work immediately and invites her to return at midday to see the results of his labor. He remains focused within the secluded workshop, the rhythmic sound of his hammer echoing through the surrounding woods as the morning sun climbs higher. The young man wipes sweat from his brow, his focus absolute as he contemplates the delicate balance of the task. To increase the penetration power of the huntress's arrows while maintaining their durability requires every ounce of his expertise, and he views this as the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his true skills. With steady hands, he meticulously shapes the small metal tips at his workbench. The precision required for such fine work is a stark contrast to the heavy labor of the forge, requiring a different kind of concentration to ensure each piece is perfect. After hours of dedicated effort, he examines the finished set of arrowheads, satisfied with their uniform quality. He then turns his attention to his own blade, ensuring it is ready for whatever lies ahead as he prepares to leave the heat of the forge behind. Stepping out from the sweltering heat of the workshop, he spreads his arms to embrace the refreshing outdoor air. The natural breeze feels like a luxury after the oppressive atmosphere of the sauna-like forge, providing a much-needed moment of relief. However, the sudden change in temperature catches him off guard, and a sharp sneeze escapes him. He reminds himself to be more cautious, as cooling down too rapidly could lead to an unwanted chill despite the pleasant wind. Moments later, he presents the new equipment to the young huntress, who marvels at the elegant design and surprising lightness of the arrowheads compared to her previous ones. Eager to see the results of his craftsmanship, she fits one to her bow and aims at a distant tree in the backyard, noting that they just need to see if it hasn't lost its penetration power. The string snaps with a sharp twang, and the arrow streaks through the air with incredible velocity. It strikes the target with a thunderous impact, the force of the blow sending splinters flying as it bites deep into the wood. She stares in disbelief, her eyes wide as she realizes the arrow didn't just strike the tree. It pierced clean through to the other side. The sheer power of the specialized tip far exceeds anything she has ever used before. Overwhelmed by the result, she asks if such skill is common among the craftsmen of the city, wondering if there are many others like him. He simply offers a humble laugh, insisting that his work is nothing out of the ordinary and that any of his former colleagues could have done the same. He considers the words of the village chief, Barris, regarding the elderly local blacksmith. He realizes that his arrival will likely cause a stir among the villagers, but he remains focused on his goal, planning to accept work requests as soon as he is properly settled. Stepping into the town square, he is taken aback by the crowd already forming. Despite not having established a workspace yet, the news of a new smith has spread rapidly, drawing a level of enthusiasm that feels almost overwhelming. Among the onlookers, the local residents watch with a mixture of curiosity and hope, their eyes fixed on the newcomer who might finally provide the skilled labor their community has lacked. Later, while discussing logistics with the guild official, Schmidt, the suggestion is made to move his operations to the central square. This would allow him to work with the same specialized tools used in the past, away from the distractions of his temporary quarters. As he prepares to begin his work, a young boy approaches, his expression a blend of skepticism and desperation. The youth asks if he is truly the master smith the chief spoke of, to which he responds with humble assurance, offering to handle any manner of metalwork or repairs. The boy holds out a heavy, cloth-wrapped object, admitting his hesitation to entrust such a vital tool to a stranger. He recognizes the boy's calloused hands and sturdy build, correctly identifying him as a woodcutter and asking if the axe belongs to his father. After a brief inspection of the boy's posture and the weapon itself, the smith offers a price of 30 silver coins for the sharpening. He notes the boy's keen observation skills, acknowledging that the youth has a good eye for quality. The young woodcutter agrees to the fee but warns that he will not hesitate to haggle if the final result is anything less than perfect. He accepts the challenge with a confident smile, unfazed by the boy's bluntness. The smith then reveals his specialized sharpening equipment, much to the boy's amazement. As he prepares the heavy machinery, he warns his young client that the process will be loud and intense. With a sudden surge of power, he brings the blade to the grinding stone, sending a cascade of brilliant sparks into the air. The boy recoils in shock at the sheer ferocity of the work, realizing that this is no ordinary blacksmith. He remains focused, ignoring the watchful eyes of the villagers who are scrutinizing his every move. He knows that in this countryside, a blacksmith's reputation is built on the quality of his work, and he intends to prove his worth by focusing solely on the blade before him. Once the task is complete, he presents the finished axe to the young boy, who gazes at the gleaming metal in disbelief. The edge is so sharp and the finish so beautiful that the child can hardly contain his excitement. Eager to test the transformed tool, with a confident smirk, he asks if his skills have finally been acknowledged. The boy, now a firm believer, enthusiastically confirms that no one could witness such craftsmanship and remain unconvinced. This display of mastery quickly draws a crowd, as villagers begin clamoring for his services, thrusting their own dull kitchen knives and worn axes toward him. He raises his hands to calm the growing excitement, simply stating that he understands and will help them all. As he organizes the eager villagers into a line, he finds a deep sense of satisfaction in the work. Seeing these well-used and cherished tools reminds him of the importance of his craft, making the labor feel truly rewarding. Meanwhile, far from the bustling village square, the sun glints off the ornate spires of a grand estate, where more formal matters are being discussed. Inside the lavishly appointed room, Schmidt introduces himself with a polite bow, welcoming his guests to the guild's headquarters. He addresses the woman seated before him, identifying her as the guild master of the prestigious Wings of Glory. She sits with an air of effortless authority, her long, light-colored hair cascading over her shoulders as she listens to the official. Joining the conversation, Lady Sia of the Lusarka Third Knight Order explains the purpose of their visit, noting that while the guild is full of excellent adventurers, they are searching for someone specific. The guild master leans forward, her interest piqued as Sia reveals their true objective. They are looking for a legendary blacksmith capable of forging katanas. She pauses, her sharp eyes narrowing as a thought takes hold. The search for the elusive blacksmith is paramount, and every lead must be scrutinized with the utmost care. While she contemplates her next move, the very man she seeks is miles away, living under a different name. The young man known to the villagers as Sig continues his work, his presence a source of curiosity and admiration for the locals. He stands amidst a small crowd, effortlessly handling his tools while the woodcutter's son looks on with pride. To them, he is simply a skilled craftsman who has brought new life to their community, unaware that his true identity and extraordinary talents are the very things being sought by the powerful forces beyond their borders. Day stands amidst the memory of a shattered blade, the remnants of a massive greatsword that was severed in a single, impossible stroke. Since that day, every time she swings her own weapon, a hunger within her grows, a deep-seated craving for the craftsmanship that could achieve such a feat. Her desire crystallizes as she gazes at the gleaming, razor-sharp edge of a katana. The steel reflects a cold, lethal beauty, and she knows with absolute certainty that she must possess such a blade. Later, in the quiet solitude of her chambers, she reflects on her life's work, having ingrained the kingdom's finest swordsmanship into her very soul since she was a child of 6. Despite her mastery, she found herself unable to suppress the urge to seek out this foreign weapon, a compulsion that eventually led her here. She meets with the guild official, who offers his apologies, explaining that the blacksmith known as Sig departed their ranks some weeks ago. Though the official boasts of other masters capable of forging niche items like katanas, she remains unconvinced, sensing that Sig possessed a unique, extraordinary devotion to the craft that others simply cannot replicate. Her doubts linger as she watches other knights training in the courtyard below, questioning if any smith could truly match the skill she witnessed. While she acknowledges that a weapon's effectiveness ultimately depends on the one wielding it, she cannot shake her obsession with the perfection Sig achieved. Far from the guild's politics, the man she seeks is deep in his work, listening intently to the sharp, metallic ring of a cooling blade. He recognizes the sound as the first cry of the sword, a result of the precise cooling speeds and the specific clay used, resulting in what he considers a truly elegant expression of steel. He exhales a weary but satisfied breath, wiping the sweat from his brow as he inspects the quenched blade. The heat of the forge still clings to him, but the most temperamental part of the process is finally complete. The final stages begin as he meticulously works the steel against a series of whetstones, moving from rough to medium and finally to the finishing stones. Each stroke brings out the beautiful, undulating wave patterns of the Hammond, and he knows that after all the time invested, the masterpiece is nearly finished. He stood in silence, his gaze fixed upon the blade resting on the wooden stand. It had been 2 years since he last had the luxury of time to craft a katana of this caliber, and though his skills had sharpened during his tenure at the guild, he felt the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on him, a level of mastery that still felt agonizingly out of reach. Gripping the hilt, he felt the balance of the steel, a physical manifestation of his progress and his lingering doubts. The memory of his father's work bloomed in his mind like a field of crimson spider lilies, beautiful yet haunting, reminding him of the heights he had yet to scale. Later, as he prepared to wash away the grime of the forge, the question of how his father reached such a pinnacle of craftsmanship continued to gnaw at him. It was this very pursuit of perfection, this unattainable standard, that made it impossible for him to ever walk away from the anvil. Submerging himself in the steaming water of the bath, a rare luxury in this village, he felt the physical fatigue and the mental strain of the day begin to dissolve. It was a stark contrast to his days at the guild, where a quick rinse with cold water was the only respite from the relentless pressure of meeting quotas. His thoughts drifted back to an hour earlier, when he had emerged from the workshop, his skin and clothes stained black from 5 days of secluded labor. Mary and Atra had approached him then, bearing a generous gift of rockboar meat, a share of the day's successful hunt. He had accepted the offering with genuine gratitude, acknowledging their kindness while they, in turn, credited the success of their hunt to the superior quality of the arrowheads he had forged for them. With the meat now in his possession, he set to work in the kitchen, meticulously preparing it by piercing the flesh and rubbing in a blend of salt and pepper. He knew that true flavor required patience, and this particular cut would need 3 days of curing to reach its full potential. The following morning, he found Mary dressed in her hunting gear, a vibrant red cloak draped over her shoulders. He offered a warm compliment on her appearance, noting how well the gear suited her, before she eagerly inquired about the progress of the meat they had brought him. He explained that the process was far from over, as he was currently salt-curing the meat with the intention of smoking it later. Mary seemed intrigued, her brow furrowing slightly as she tried to grasp the distinction between simple preservation and the culinary art he was describing. Leaning in with a spark of passion in his eyes, he began to describe the complexities of smoking, how the choice of wood chips and the precise control of temperature could transform the flavor into something truly extraordinary. Seeing her interest, he invited her to stay and witness the start of the smoking process. He gestures toward the large wooden structure, explaining to Mary that it is a smoker he constructed himself. She peers at the box with curiosity, wondering about its purpose. Continuing his explanation, he details how the meat is hung inside to remove moisture before lighting the hickory chips, which provide a mild flavor and a pleasant color. Mary is struck by the wonderful aroma already wafting from the device, though she is taken aback when he informs her that the initial phase will take 5 hours. 5 hours pass, and the anticipation grows until he finally decides it is time to reveal the results. As the doors swing open, Mary gasps at the sight of the meat, which is taken on a beautiful, glossy brown hue that looks incredibly appetizing. Despite the tempting appearance, he stops her from reaching for a taste, explaining that the process is far from over. To her surprise, he notes that the meat must now air dry for another 2 days before it reaches its peak flavor. 2 days later, Mary rushes to find him, her excitement reaching a boiling point as the long wait finally comes to an end. She mentions that her mother, Cynthia, is still busy in the fields, but she is too eager to wait any longer to share the meal with him and her sister. He carefully prepares the finished product, noting the refined smoky aroma and the firm texture the meat has acquired. He decides on a simple preparation, slicing the smoked rock boar belly into thick steaks to be cooked without any unnecessary distractions. With the table set outdoors, the 3 of them gather around, their voices joining in a traditional thanks before they finally begin the feast they have anticipated for days. Taking the first bite, he is immediately overwhelmed by a sense of bliss as the smokiness of the hickory perfectly complements the natural aroma of the meat. The rich, deep flavor spreads across his palate, confirming that the long preservation process was a resounding success. The texture is exquisite, with the sweet fat and the deeply flavored lean meat of the rock boar melting together the moment they touch the tongue. Each bite releases the wild, robust essence of the forest. As they eat, the succulent juices overflow, and the group shares a moment of pure culinary satisfaction under the open sky. He watches with a quiet sense of accomplishment as the 2 sisters savor the fruits of his labor. Mary is particularly impressed, noting how the meat is perfectly crispy on the outside while remaining tender and juicy within, a culinary feat she feels she's truly mastered with this batch. The young man gestures toward the spread, pointing out that smoking isn't merely a method of preservation. Mary agrees wholeheartedly, her eyes wide with surprise that the same meat could be transformed into something so much more delicious through the smoking process. Under the clear sky, the trio continues their feast at the rustic wooden table outside the workshop. The atmosphere is light and jovial, with Mary admitting that the flavor is so addictive she simply cannot bring herself to stop eating. As the meal progresses, the simple pleasure of a well-earned reward becomes clear. After days and nights of grueling work, the combination of rich, smoked meat paired with a sharp glass of alcohol provides a level of satisfaction that makes every hour of labor worth the effort. He stands over the table, observing the girl's boundless appetite with a faint smile. Even Atra, usually so small and dainty, finds the savory aroma irresistible as she reaches for another helping. Seeing their enthusiasm, he offers to head back to the grill to prepare another round. The suggestion is met with immediate, joyful approval, as the girls are far from finished with their celebration. Once the initial hunger is sated, Mary turns the conversation toward his future, addressing him as Sig. She inquires about his long-term plans for the items he creates, noting that he has been dedicated to his blacksmithing ever since his arrival in the village. He pauses, reflecting on his journey thus far. While he was once content simply with the ability to forge katanas, leaving the guild has sparked a new curiosity within him regarding how his work would be evaluated by others, though he acknowledges the practical hurdle that no one in the immediate area actually uses such specialized blades. Sensing his dilemma, Mary proposes a solution, suggesting that he accompany them on their next trip to Umbert. She explains that they regularly sell their own produce at the market there and believes there would be a significant demand for his high-quality, smoked meat as well. He considers the name, the memory of a small, quiet town coming to mind. He questions her about the destination, wondering if the Umbert he remembers is the same bustling market hub she is describing. He listened as Mary described how much Umbert had grown, becoming the most bustling hub in the region. The prospect of selling his craft there sparked a quiet ambition. If he could find a market for his blades, his dream of a peaceful, self-sufficient life might finally be within reach. When she invited him to join their caravan in 2 days' time, he accepted with a polite nod, placing himself in their care. Despite his calm demeanor, she worried about the dangers of the road, specifically the monsters that plagued the path to the city. He offered a reassuring smile, insisting he could handle himself, though he humbly downplayed his skills by claiming to be nothing more than a simple blacksmith. This modest assurance brought a wave of relief to the sisters, who explained that monster encounters had frequently forced them to abandon their trips, leaving their produce to rot. With a newfound sense of security, they hurried off to share the good news with their mother, leaving him to prepare for the journey ahead. 2 days later, as the morning sun began to climb, the group gathered for their departure. Seeing him arrive with seemingly nothing but the clothes on his back, Mary's brow furrowed in confusion as she questioned where he had stowed his supplies for the trip. In response, the young man simply gestured to a small, unassuming pouch fastened to his belt. The realization hit her instantly, her eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of a rare and incredibly valuable magic bag. Before she could even process the existence of such an item, he further stunned her by claiming he could easily manage the weight of their entire transport cart as well. He stood confidently by the large wooden vehicle, his casual posture belying the extraordinary feat he was about to perform. With a swift, practiced motion, he activated the enchanted vessel, causing the massive cart to vanish into the tiny pouch as if it were weightless. As the sisters stood frozen in shock at the sheer convenience of his magic, he turned toward the road, ready to begin the trek to Umbert. However, deep within the surrounding woods, predatory eyes watched their every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. The group sets out from the village, leaving the familiar buildings behind as they head toward the dense forest. Najii takes the lead, his expression serious as he warns the others to stay alert. He explains that this path is unlike the ones they've traveled before, and the likelihood of encountering monsters in these woods is high. Behind him, the women enjoy the unburdened travel. Mary remarks on how wonderful it is to move freely without the weight of a horse-drawn cart, a sentiment Cynthia echoes, attributing their ease to Najii's presence. He glances back at them, noting their carefree demeanor. A sense of responsibility weighs on him. He realizes that their trust in him and Mary is absolute, and he vows to himself that he will never betray that confidence. Suddenly, he halts, his senses sharpening. When Mary asks what has caught his attention, he informs her of monsters lurking ahead and instructs her to protect the others while he investigates. Moving silently, he slips behind the thick trunk of a tree to scout the area ahead. In a clearing just beyond, a pack of large, predatory beasts with thick, shaggy fur and sharp claws mill about, unaware of his presence. He identifies them as green wolves, noting that they have positioned themselves directly across their intended route. He briefly considers whether a tactical retreat to form a better plan might be the wisest course of action. She steps up beside him, her bow gripped firmly and a look of unwavering resolve on her face. Without hesitation, she declares their intent to eliminate the threat and clear the path forward. She stood ready as the group discussed the threat. With green wolves prowling so close to the village, eliminating them was the only way to ensure everyone's safety, especially with a capable warrior like Sig among them. He turned to the others, instructing Atra and Cynthia to remain hidden while he and Mary moved forward, promising to do his absolute best to protect them and meet their expectations. They crept through the undergrowth, spotting the pack of green wolves ahead. The beasts remained oblivious to their presence, sniffing the air but failing to detect the hunters closing in. Seizing the moment of surprise, she drew her bow with practiced ease, her eyes narrowing as she took aim at the lead creature while her companion prepared to follow up her strike. Her arrow flew true, striking a wolf with a sickening thud that elicited a pained howl, and before the pack could react, he lunged forward, his blade a silver flash that cleaved through the air with terrifying precision. As he dispatched his target, another wolf lunged from the shadows, but she was faster, pinning the beast to the ground with a well-placed shot that drew a sharp cry of praise from him. He looked at her with genuine admiration, noting that her quick decision-making and arrow accuracy were remarkable. In his eyes, her courage in the face of such monsters proved she had the makings of a true adventurer. She smiled, attributing her success to the superior arrowheads he had forged, explaining that her previous equipment lacked the stability and piercing power needed to finish the job, while he offered her advice on maintaining the durability and sharpness of her own weapons. He watched as she carefully retrieved one of the spent projectiles, curious as to why she was still holding on to something that had already served its purpose. She looked down at the arrowhead with a soft, determined expression, explaining that while she might run out of money if she threw them away after one use, the real reason was sentimental. Because he had made them specifically for her, she intended to take the utmost care of every single one. She listened intently as the knight spoke of the bond between a warrior and their tools, explaining that while many adventurers might discard broken arrows without a second thought, a true blacksmith sees the potential for renewal and strength. To her, the idea that a craftsman exists specifically to mend what is broken offered a profound sense of security in their often perilous trade. She then watched as he turned his focus toward her, insisting with a gentle but firm tone that she report any warping or damage to her gear immediately so he could personally attend to the repairs. He admitted a personal preference for crafting items for those he knows by name, finding far more fulfillment in seeing the faces of those who rely on his handiwork. He went on to formally declare her as the very first patron of his workshop, a milestone that brought a radiant, appreciative smile to her face. Beside them, the young girl couldn't contain her excitement, beaming with joy and shouting her gratitude for the kindness and care he had shown them both. He continued to reflect on the strange and unexpected turn his life had taken, pondering the path he had found in this frontier and realizing he had discovered a form of free blacksmithing that truly suited his spirit. Though many questions about his future and his past remained unanswered, He resolved to seek those truths only when the time was right. He and the others were suddenly halted by a thunderous growl from the young girl's stomach, a clear sign that their journey required a culinary intermission. Realizing that hunger had finally overtaken their momentum, the group agreed it was time to find a place to rest. She and the rest of the party quickly found a scenic spot to spread out their belongings, transforming the wild trail into a temporary dining area. They unpacked a basket filled with provisions, preparing for a communal meal under the open sky. They were soon presented with sandwiches filled with fresh spring vegetables by the young woman. But he realized with the start that he had neglected to prepare a contribution of his own for the meal. Determined to provide something special for his companions, he promised to whip up a unique dish right then and there using the supplies he had on hand. She observed with growing curiosity as he arranged thick slices of cheese over a bed of aromatic hickory chips inside a heavy earthen pot, working with the practiced efficiency of a master. When the young girl grew worried at the rising plumes of smoke, he quickly reassured her that it was merely a controlled method for smoking food, promising a delicious result. He allowed the flavors to meld for 10 minutes. The savory scent of the smoking would beginning to fill the clearing and whet their appetites. The simple ingredients were slowly transformed by the steady application of heat and smoke. He finally removed the lid to reveal the perfectly browned cheese, a simple yet masterful creation ready to be shared with his hungry companions. The rich color and aroma confirmed that his impromptu culinary experiment was a success. He proudly presents the fruits of his labor. For perfectly assembled smoked sandwiches, the bread glistening under the light as the aroma of the freshly prepared meal fills the air. With the meal ready, the group gathers around in the clearing, their anticipation palpable as they prepare to dig into the unexpected feast. Dea takes the first bite, her eyes widening at the complex flavors. She marvels at the thick, buttery bread and the perfect balance between the salted mashed potatoes and spring vegetables, expressing deep gratitude for such a high-quality meal after a long period of eating mostly meat. Beside her, Mary and Atra are equally enthralled, noting that the powerful, savory aroma of the smoked cheese is almost overwhelming, a delicacy they find truly exceptional. Taking a bite himself, the young blacksmith notes with satisfaction how the smoky sweetness of his preparation perfectly mellows the sharp saltiness of the cheese, confirming the success of his culinary experiment. Once the meal is finished and their strength restored, the travelers resume their trek through the wilderness, the young man sensing that their destination is finally within reach as the landscape begins to change. As they push through the final stretch of forest, the night leads the way, her keen eyes spotting the first signs of civilization through the thinning tree line. Emerging from the woods, they are greeted by the sight of Umbert's massive outer wall, a formidable stone fortification that looms over the landscape, shimmering under the daylight. He stares at the wall in disbelief, noting that it has become far more developed than he remembered from his past, while the night hints that the interior of the city holds even greater surprises for him. Upon reaching the checkpoint, they are met by a hulking, stern-faced guard. The young man hands over his luggage for inspection and introduces himself as Sig, a blacksmith seeking to trade the swords and knives he has crafted. He stands before the imposing guard, who questions his profession. When asked if he is a blacksmith who specializes in the blades worn at the waist, he confirms his trade. The guard then requests to inspect his work, and he readily agrees. Taking the weapon, the guard marvels at the craftsmanship, noting the exquisite beauty of what he identifies as a katana. The weight and balance of the blade seem to command respect even from a seasoned soldier. Handing the sword back, the guard inquires if his destination is the city's free market. He confirms his intent to do business there today. With a boisterous laugh, the guard jokingly asks to keep the fine blade for himself, but he politely declines the offer, sharing a brief moment of levity before proceeding. Stepping into the heart of Umbert, he is immediately struck by the sheer vibrancy of the city. The streets are teeming with life, a stark contrast to the quiet journey he just completed. He pauses to take it all in, wondering if the path ahead leads toward the market district. The market is a sprawling tapestry of commerce, with rows of stalls and a constant hum of activity as merchants and citizens go about their day. Finding a suitable location, he secures a permit for a single silver coin. He observes that he isn't the only blacksmith vying for attention, noting the presence of other craftsmen nearby as he prepares his own space. With his stall finally arranged, he takes a moment to survey his inventory. Everything is in its place, and the time has come to see if the people of Umbert value his craft. As evening shadows begin to stretch across the cobblestones, a sense of unease settles over him. The day has been quiet, with hardly any customers stopping by. He wonders if attempting to sell his wares without the backing of a guild was too ambitious, especially with the time to meet his companions drawing near. Suddenly, the familiar, hulking figure of the gate guard reappears, asking how his sales are progressing. The guard is visibly shocked to see so many items still on display. He expresses disbelief that a craftsman of such obvious skill would have any products left at this hour, while he can only offer a sheepish confirmation of the slow day. Recalling the weapon he saw earlier, the guard insists that his eyes do not deceive him. He speaks of the refined beauty and combat-ready design of the sword at the young man's waist, while the blacksmith tries to remain humble, downplaying his own talent despite the veteran's high praise. He watches as the veteran guard examines the array of blades, the man's eyes widening at the craftsmanship. The guard notes that while the weapons are beautiful, they clearly possess a lethal utility meant for the heat of battle. Hearing such high praise from a seasoned warrior, the young blacksmith offers a humble smile. The guard speculates that he must be a renowned master or perhaps an exclusive smith for a powerful organization, noting that his name isn't well known, yet his skill is undeniable. The youth simply expresses his gratitude, stating it is an honor to hear such words from a warrior of his stature. Extending a hand in a gesture of mutual respect, the guard introduces himself as Garland and insists they dispense with formalities. The two men share a firm handshake across the wooden stall, establishing a sudden but genuine rapport. Since he cannot wield a full-size sword in his current duty, Garland asks if he might inspect the daggers instead. The smith gestures for him to go ahead, inviting the veteran to judge the smaller blades for himself. Drawing a dagger from its sheath, the guard feels the weight and balance, his expression turning solemn as he confirms the exceptional quality. Without hesitation, he declares his intent to purchase one of the fine tools. When asked for the price, the youth suggests 40 silver coins, a figure that causes the guard to pause in surprise. To a man who knows the value of steel, such a price for work of this caliber seems remarkably low, and he questions if it isn't a bit too cheap. As the transaction concludes, Garland's attention shifts to the smoked meats displayed alongside the weaponry. The smith explains that the food is merely a hobby, but the guard, intrigued by the quality, decides to purchase a portion of the smoked goods as well. A boisterous laugh erupts from the veteran as he collects his purchases, finding the combination of masterclass smithing and casual food preparation to be highly unusual. He bids the young man farewell, thoroughly impressed by the encounter. Shortly after the guard departs, a well-dressed man with wavy hair approaches the stall, his curiosity piqued by the aroma. He samples a piece of the smoked meat, and the reaction is instantaneous. His eyes bulge in shock as the complex flavors hit his palate. He shouts in disbelief, demanding to know what this incredible food is, as he has never tasted anything quite like it in the city. Identifying himself as the owner of the most popular food store in town, the merchant is so impressed by the taste that he immediately offers to buy the entire stock. He is confident in his own refined palate and knows this product will sell exceptionally well among his clientele. The blacksmith can only watch in mild shock, realizing with a touch of irony that his culinary hobby might actually be more profitable in Umbert than his legendary blades. He wandered through the bustling streets of Umbert, his mind preoccupied with the hope of finding a customer truly in need of a master-crafted blade. Far beneath the surface, on the 27th floor of the labyrinth, a different story was unfolding. A powerful warrior unleashed a devastating strike, her movements a blur of lethal grace that echoed through the stone halls. This display of sheer power left the surrounding adventurers in awe, their voices rising in a chorus of disbelief at how such a slender sword could deliver such a crushing blow in a single strike. However, the warrior herself, known as Lady Keed, did not share their celebration. She looked down at her weapon with a growing sense of unease, her triumph overshadowed by a sudden concern for the integrity of her steel. She realized with a start that the intense clash had taken its toll, leaving a visible chip in the fine edge of her blade. Knowing that only one man possessed the skill to restore such a delicate instrument, she resolved to seek out Sig's forge immediately. Meanwhile, back on the surface, the young blacksmith continued his search, unaware that the very sword user he sought was already destined to find him. Najii navigates the bustling streets of Umbert, his senses sharp as he takes in the local commerce. He soon encounters a pair of young travelers. A boy named Thor is vibrating with excitement over the weapons displayed in the market, while his companion, Lisha, attempts to temper his enthusiasm. She suggests they look for gear in more established shops, but the boy is already drawn to the unique items nearby. Najii watches them, noting their youthful energy and concluding they must be novice adventurers, perhaps even younger than those he left behind in the village. The boy's attention is immediately seized by the weapon Najii carries, his eyes widening as he recognizes the distinct shape of a katana. Sensing the youth's genuine curiosity, Najii offers to let him take a closer look, slowly drawing the blade from its scabbard to reveal the gleaming steel beneath. He stands frozen, his breath hitching as the light dances across the masterfully forged edge. Najii, noticing the sudden stillness, wonders if the boy finds the weapon uninteresting, unaware that the youth is simply overwhelmed by the craftsmanship. The youth finally finds his voice, his face flushing with pure, unadulterated joy as he exclaims how incredible the blade is. He mentions seeing sparks within the steel and admits that in all his travels, he has never encountered anything of such exquisite quality. This raw, honest reaction catches Najii off guard, as he never expected his work to elicit such a profound response from a stranger in the middle of a busy market. He watches the boy with a newfound sense of pride in his craft. While the young traveler remains enamored, his companion is deeply skeptical, reminding him of his tendency to be fooled by counterfeit goods. She questions if he can even distinguish a genuine blade from a fake, though even she cannot deny that the sword possesses a striking, undeniable beauty. Undeterred by her skepticism, the boy declares his absolute desire to purchase the katana, looking to Najii for a price. The swordsman calmly states the cost is 200 gold coins, a figure that causes the girl to recoil in shock, unable to fathom how such a slender weapon could command such a staggering price. The swordsman begins to explain the value, noting that a katana is not merely made of iron, but of a specialized material known as tamahage. He details the decades of rigorous training and experience required to master the forging process, emphasizing that the price reflects the immense skill and rare materials poured into the blade. He accepts the young girl's apology with a gentle wave of his hand, assuring her that there is no harm done. He explains that being able to recognize high-quality craftsmanship is a valuable trait for any adventurer, rather than something to be discouraged. Because of this, the young boy slumps his shoulders in defeat, realizing that the 200 gold coins required for the katana are far beyond his reach. His companion teases him, noting that as an E-rank adventurer, it would take him a decade to earn such a sum, even if he saved every copper. Seeing their plight, the swordsman offers a more practical alternative, suggesting that a short sword might be within their current means. Internally, he reflects on his own early days at the guild, feeling a surge of nostalgia and a genuine desire to help these earnest newcomers who remind him of his past. He then presents a smaller blade, drawing it from its sheath to show the gleaming metal. The boy's eyes widen in awe at the quality of the short sword, and the swordsman invites him to test its edge on a nearby target to see its true worth. While the boy remains skeptical that such a small weapon could be effective, the swordsman offers a stern warning. He cautions the youth to be careful with his strike, as the blade is sharp enough to split not just the target, but the very table beneath it if he isn't precise. Taking the advice to heart, the boy steadies himself and delivers a swift, downward strike. The blade passes through the thick wooden block with effortless precision, leaving a perfectly clean cut that leaves him breathless. In response to the incredible feat, the young girl gasps in disbelief, questioning when her partner became so proficient with a blade. The boy, equally stunned, can only stammer that the result was due to the weapon's extraordinary quality rather than his own meager skill. Moments later, the swordsman reveals the price of 30 silver coins, a much more manageable figure for the pair. The boy's face lights up with relief as he realizes that this superior weapon is finally within his grasp. Having completed the sale, the swordsman watches as the boy celebrates his new acquisition with infectious enthusiasm. He admits to himself that he provided a significant discount, moved by the fact that the boy was the only one in the market to truly appreciate the masterwork of the katana, even if he couldn't afford it. As the two young adventurers head toward the city's south gate, the swordsman watches them depart. They walk away with renewed confidence, the boy clutching his new short sword as they prepare for the journey ahead. He and his companion head off toward the gate, leaving the young blacksmith to be greeted warmly by the sisters. Mary commends his hard work, while Atra watches with a bright smile, noting how pleasant it is to see such youthful energy. Having finished his own business, the young man recounts the day's successes, noting that while only one adventurer purchased a sword, his smoked goods were surprisingly popular. He even mentions a visit from the gatekeeper, Garland, who stopped by to make a purchase. The sisters are delighted by the news, with the elder one remarking that his culinary skills are so impressive they might soon attract a dedicated following. She holds her younger sister close, both of them clearly proud of their friend's contributions. Their own efforts proved equally fruitful, as their stall stands completely empty of the goods they brought to market. The elder sister asks how his side of the work went, her face beaming with the satisfaction of a successful day of trade. She explains that the magic bag's ability to preserve freshness was a game changer, allowing them to command even higher prices than usual without any loss in quality. Seeing the success, the younger girl excitedly suggests they take some time to explore the city of Umber together. The idea is met with immediate approval, and the group decides to indulge in some shopping and a good meal before making the journey home. The young blacksmith expresses his gratitude, eager to see more of the bustling city under their guidance. As they stroll through the vibrant market streets, the conversation turns to practical needs, with the young man mentioning his dwindling supply of seasonings and his interest in finding materials for his forge. The elder sister offers to lead him to a shop where quality goods can be found at a fair price. They soon arrive at a well-stocked stall where a merchant is busy arranging barrels and crates. The man looks up with a friendly greeting, surprised to see them finished with their work so early in the day. Stepping forward, the blacksmith introduces himself simply as Sig and explains that he is in the market for seasonings. The merchant welcomes them warmly, ready to assist with their request. The shopkeeper reaches into a container, pulling out a sample of coarse, white crystals to show his potential customer. The young man leans in, examining the quality of the salt with the same discerning eye he applies to his metalwork. He decides to stock up, requesting 5 kilograms each of salt and pepper. The merchant is taken aback by the sheer volume, questioning if such a large quantity is truly necessary. In response, the traveler explains his need for smoking meat, prompting the merchant to offer a selection of wood chips to enhance the process. Looking over the options, the young man sees bundles of oak, apple, walnut, and grapevine. He inquires specifically about the properties of the grapevine, and after a moment's consideration, decides to purchase the entire stock of wood. As he inspects the vines, he notes their soft texture, realizing they will burn rapidly. This makes them ideal for a quick infusion of flavor or for smoking at lower temperatures, a detail he keeps in mind for his future culinary endeavors. The merchant is impressed by this level of expertise, remarking on how much the traveler seems to know about the craft of smoking. The young man simply smiles, confident that the quality of his smoked dishes speaks for itself. To prove his point, he offers the merchant a taste of some leftovers he has on hand. The man is surprised by the offer but accepts the small morsel with growing curiosity. Upon taking a bite, the merchant's eyes widen in sudden realization. The flavor is far beyond what he expected, catching him completely off guard. He is nearly overwhelmed by the quality, noting how the smoky aroma has perfectly infused the meat. The concentrated umami of the boar meat is unlike anything he has encountered in the market before. Desperate for more, the merchant practically begs for another serving of the delicacy. The traveler agrees to provide 20 more pieces, suggesting they deduct the value from the total cost of the spices and what he just purchased. With the terms settled, the two men shake hands, both satisfied with the unexpected turn their business transaction has taken. As they depart, the young man expresses his gratitude to his companion for the introduction. Mary beams with pride, happy to have been of help in finding such a reliable source for his needs. She lets out a soft sigh as her stomach betrays her with a loud, insistent growl, her expression turning sheepish as the hunger finally catches up with her after their long day of trading. Her fatigue is met with a sincere apology from him for the long detour they took through the market, as he leads the group toward a humble wooden cart where the savory scent of frying oil hangs heavy in the air. He suggests they stop for some croquette skewers, a proposal that is met with immediate, enthusiastic approval from the weary travelers as he reflects on the nostalgic comfort the simple dish once provided during trips with his own father. He steps up to the vendor and holds up 4 fingers to request a serving for everyone, soon returning to the waiting group with the steaming treats in hand. He insists on paying when she reaches for her coin purse, explaining that the meal is a small token of gratitude for her help in maintaining the freshness of their goods within the magic bag. They eagerly dig into the snacks, the children finding the potatoes inside to be wonderfully light and fluffy as they offer muffled cries of delight between bites. They savor the fluffy potatoes while he reflects on how such a simple street food, costing less than a single copper coin, can carry such a heavy weight of memory, recalling how his father always made sure to buy these treats for him at the conclusion of their many trips together. He watches the others enjoy their meal and realizes that the collective warmth of his new companions is beginning to blend with and brighten the bittersweet memories of his past, transforming his solitary recollections into something shared. He feels the happiness of this shared moment becoming more intense and deeper, slowly overriding the loneliness he once associated with these flavors as they linger together at the small outdoor table. He finally stands and suggests that, now that everyone has had their fill and regained their strength, it is time to begin the trek back to the village, a proposal that is met with enthusiastic agreement from a satisfied group. He leads the small group through the city streets, the weight of the young girl, Atra, heavy but comforting against his shoulder as she slumbers. The others follow close behind, their bellies full and spirits high after their shared meal. While they depart, a new figure arrives at the guild's grand entrance, a warrior from the far east named Keed. She has traveled across the sea, seeking a master of the forge, her eyes scanning the bustling hall with a singular purpose. She approaches the reception desk with a firm stride, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. When she inquires about the man known as Sig, the receptionist, Torque, can only offer a hesitant look, informing her that the blacksmith is no longer present. This revelation strikes her like a physical blow, her eyes widening in disbelief. Torque continues, explaining that the man she seeks severed his ties with the Wings of Glory guild nearly a fortnight ago, leaving a void where his expertise once resided. She refuses to accept such a vague explanation, her voice rising with an intensity that leaves the receptionist stammering. Demanding the truth behind his sudden departure, she turns away, determined to confront the guild master herself. Moments later, she stands within the opulent office of the guild master, who greets her with a calm, almost dismissive air. Keed wastes no time, pressing for the specific circumstances that led a craftsman of his caliber to abandon his post. The guild master sighs, painting a picture of a stubborn and selfish artisan. She claims he was obsessed with crafting niche weaponry like katanas, neglecting the guild's primary contracts until his pride eventually drove him to quit in a fit of pique. Hearing this, the warrior's grip on her scabbard tightens, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She knows the man's dedication better than most and suspects that unreasonable demands from officials like Schmidt were the true catalyst for his exit. She speaks out in his defense, her voice ringing with conviction as she explains that a katana is not a mere minor thing, but a masterpiece of engineering that requires specialized knowledge. To her, the guild master's dismissal reveals a profound ignorance of the very tools that sustain their order. As a new, urgent request from a high-ranking lord arrives, the warrior makes a silent vow. She will fulfill her immediate duties with haste, but her true mission has shifted. She will find the blacksmith, no matter where his path has led. Ag stands in his workshop, examining a short sword with a critical eye. He reflects on his recent sales, noting that while 3 blades found buyers, his farming implements remained untouched, leaving him to ponder the needs of the local market. He considers the changing landscape of the frontier, wondering if the 15 years he spent away have shifted the local priorities from agriculture to defense, as the demand for weapons seems to have eclipsed the need for tools. Beyond the workshop, the town of Umbert draws travelers from distant villages, yet the specific requirements of these newcomers remain a mystery to the returning smith. Looking at his modest stall, he reminds himself that one day of sales is not enough to judge the market, especially since his reputation as a master craftsman has yet to spread among the townspeople. He decides to pivot his strategy for the next market day, planning to forge more of the short swords and arrowheads that had caught Liliana's eye, hoping to capitalize on what has already proven successful. Spreading out his materials, he resolves to create weapons that the locals are already familiar with, using these common designs as a showcase for his superior craftsmanship and attention to detail. As he begins to sketch his designs, he harbors a quiet hope that once his skill is recognized through these standard blades, he might eventually find someone who appreciates the artistry of a true katana. The workshop remains illuminated long after the sun sets, the rhythmic sounds of labor filling the quiet night as he pours his focus into the forge. He wipes the sweat from his brow, reflecting on the simplicity of this new life. Despite the physical exhaustion of a week's straight work, the absence of deadlines and social entanglements leaves his mind remarkably clear. He stands amidst the tools of his trade, a full week of solitary labor behind him. The workshop is silent now, the heat of the forge replaced by the quiet satisfaction of completed work. Stepping out into the bright daylight, he notices the shift in the air. The season has warmed while he was focused on the anvil. The constant movement between home and the forge had made him lose track of time, and he decides a break is long overdue. On the wooden porch, he stretches his weary limbs, the sun warming his skin. A walk seems like the perfect remedy for his confinement. As he wanders, he happens upon the sisters, who are surprised to see him out and about. He explains that he has been busy preparing a new stock of items for the upcoming free market, finally emerging from his self-imposed isolation. The elder sister looks at him with a mix of relief and lingering worry, urging him to show his face more often. She admits she had begun to fear he might have collapsed from exhaustion within the walls of his workshop. He asks if they are tending to the crops, and she confirms they are currently tackling the weeds. It is a daunting task given the sheer size of the land they must manage. Surveying the expansive greenery, he realizes the scale of their labor. When she tentatively asks for his assistance, he readily agrees, seeing the manual labor as a welcome change of pace from the precision of the forge. Crouched low in the dirt, he begins to clear the unwanted growth, the rhythmic work bringing back distant memories. It has been many years since he last put his hands to the earth in this way. His mind drifts back to his childhood, to a time shortly after his mother's passing when he had helped in the fields. The memory is bittersweet, a fragment of a life long since changed. Sensing his introspection, the young woman offers a sincere apology for perhaps stirring up painful thoughts. He quickly reassures her, explaining that at his age, those memories no longer carry the sting they once did. She listens as he expresses a desire to return to the fields, though he admits his duties at the forge leave him little time to manage a plot of his own. Sensing his dilemma, she proposes a solution, joining their local farming cooperative, where the burden of labor is shared among the community. Surprised by the suggestion, he wonders if such a flexible arrangement is even possible. She reassures him, explaining that mutual aid is the foundation of their community. While the women manage the daily tasks, a man's strength is invaluable for the heavy labor of clearing land and preparing the soil during the peak seasons. Beyond the labor, she notes that having him along would provide a sense of security, especially during their trips to Umbert. The memory of their previous travels lingers in her smile, as she emphasizes how reassuring his presence would be for the group as they navigate the roads together. The offer is perfect, aligning exactly with his own hopes for a balanced life. His eyes brighten with genuine excitement at the prospect of returning to the earth alongside those he has come to care for, finding the opportunity to be exactly what he needed. He readily agrees to the proposal, much to the delight of the younger girls. Liliana and Lena cheer at the news, their faces lighting up with joy at the thought of working side by side with the man they know as Sig, eager to have him as part of their daily routine. 3 days pass before the young hunter approaches him again, her expression earnest. She inquires about his availability, checking if he has any mornings free in the coming days to assist with the urgent tasks that the changing season demands. He confirms that his schedule clears after tomorrow and asks what specific labor awaits. With a burst of energy, she announces that the spring cabbage harvest is finally upon them, a pivotal and busy moment in the farming calendar that requires every available hand. The anticipation of the harvest fills him with a sense of purpose. He looks forward to the physical toil and the simple satisfaction of gathering the fruits of the season's labor, eager to experience the joy of the harvest firsthand. As the sun begins to rise on the appointed day, he meets the sisters near the wagons. Despite the early hour, the girls are brimming with energy, explaining that they are well accustomed to starting their work before the rest of the world wakes, ready to head to the fields. As they prepare to set out for the fields, she pauses, a thoughtful look crossing her face. She turns to him, her voice dropping slightly as she admits there is something she has been wondering about, hinting at a deeper curiosity regarding his past or his presence in their village. She gestures toward the vast expanse of the field, where rows upon rows of leafy greens stretch toward the horizon. Eiji gazes at the sheer scale of the crop, questioning if every single one of these plants is indeed a spring cabbage. Confirming his suspicion, she points further into the distance, noting that the fields beyond the immediate ridge also belong to them. Eiji feels a sudden wave of realization, wondering if he has underestimated the agricultural prowess of his companions. The morning light catches the dew clinging to the cabbages, making the droplets shimmer like scattered jewels across the noble, dignified outer leaves. It is a sight of unexpected beauty, revealing a soft, vibrant interior that seems almost otherworldly to someone unaccustomed to such bounty. Stepping closer, she begins the lesson, explaining that the first step is to press firmly on the cabbage heads to gauge their size and readiness. She emphasizes that those with a certain level of elasticity are the ones ideal for the harvest, a detail Eiji absorbs with focused intensity. As he tests the resistance of a cabbage himself, he finds a surprising parallel to his own craft, noting that the balance of firmness is much like working with steel. Too much or too little makes the material useless. The instruction continues with the physical technique. One must tilt the head of the cabbage sideways, carefully spreading the protective outer leaves to reveal the base before making a clean cut with a sharp knife. Uncertain of the exact placement, he asks for clarification on where the core is located. She moves in to demonstrate, guiding his hand and showing him exactly where to strike to ensure a perfect harvest. With a determined effort, he successfully severs the cabbage from its stalk, holding the heavy, leafy prize aloft with a look of genuine triumph. The girls offer their praise, noting that for a first-timer, he is showing remarkable aptitude for the work. However, his moment of pride is quickly humbled as he watches the two sisters work. They move through the rows with a blurred, rhythmic efficiency that leaves him stunned. Their speed is a testament to years of practice, making his own careful movements seem sluggish by comparison. Beaming with pride at her students' progress, the younger girl declares herself an excellent teacher. He acknowledges her expertise with a respectful nod, playfully addressing her with a title of mastery as they continue their labor under the morning sun. She and her sister had finally paused their frantic pace, leaving the young man to collapse against a heavy crate as the midday sun reached its zenith. He wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment as he looked over the results of their hard morning's labor. The elder sister then turned to him, asking if he would use his mystical satchel to house the harvest, noting that its properties would keep the vegetables at their peak freshness. He readily agreed, catching the cabbages as the younger girl tossed them his way with practiced ease. He was struck by the incredible convenience of the item, though he hesitated when she offered a generous portion of the cabbage as a reward for his assistance. Despite his initial reluctance to take so much, he eventually accepted, promising to be even more helpful during their next task. Their mother soon joined them, her voice warm as she invited him to stay for a lunch prepared with the very leaves they had just gathered. The table was set with an unexpectedly lavish spread, far more extravagant than the simple grilled fare he was used to preparing for himself. The first taste was a revelation. The spring cabbage was remarkably sweet and crisp, a stark contrast to the tougher varieties he was accustomed to. He could feel the fresh ingredients revitalizing his body, each bite bursting with a juicy flavor that surpassed all his expectations. A slow-cooked stew followed, brimming with an intense umami flavor that seemed to seep into his bones and restore his spent energy. The natural sweetness of the vegetables had been perfectly preserved, creating a rich and comforting meal. As he ate with gusto, the three women looked on with gentle smiles, finding joy in his obvious appreciation for their home-cooked meal. The atmosphere was light and domestic, a brief moment of peace after the morning's physical exertion. The conversation turned toward the future when the matriarch asked about his plans for Umbert, prompting him to reveal his intent to head there in 2 days. He sat amidst the remnants of the feast, already considering the logistics of his next move. Upon hearing her offer to travel together, he accepted eagerly, mindful that his companions Thor and Garland might move on if he lingered too long in the village. The prospect of traveling with the family provided a welcome sense of security for the road ahead. With their departure settled, the group gathered outside the barn, the quiet afternoon air filled with the promise of the journey ahead. The farm stood silent behind them, its harvest secured and its inhabitants ready for the next chapter of their lives. He stood before the imposing stone walls of the city, calculating the grueling 6-hour round trip he had just completed. Realizing he needed a more efficient way to travel in the future, he approached the gate and inquired if Garland was on duty. The sentry informed him that Garland was currently patrolling the city streets. Expressing his gratitude, the young man acknowledged that as the leader of the city guards, his friend couldn't remain stationed at the gate indefinitely, though he had hoped to offer a proper greeting. Moving past the entrance, he navigated the cobblestone streets of the bustling marketplace, where vendors called out from their stalls and the air was thick with the scent of trade. He eventually found a suitable location to set up his own wares, mindful that consistency was key to building a loyal clientele. Moving his shop too frequently would only lead to confusion among those seeking his services. As he prepared to open, he was startled to see a small queue already forming nearby. Hesitant and slightly embarrassed by the possibility of a misunderstanding, he approached the group to ask if they were truly waiting for his stall or perhaps the one adjacent to it. The group quickly reassured him, confirming with eager smiles that they had indeed been waiting specifically for him to begin his day's work. Looking past the first few people, his eyes widened in sheer disbelief as he realized the line stretched far back into the square. He stood frozen, overwhelmed by the unexpected crowd and wondering how word of his craft had spread so rapidly. Najii arrives at his market stall to find a small crowd already gathered. They have been waiting for him to open shop, confirming his suspicions that Thor or Garland must have been spreading the word about his craftsmanship. He politely asks them to wait just a moment longer as he prepares to begin the day's business. He begins by laying out his inventory, showcasing a variety of finely crafted blades that glint in the light. The young blacksmith proudly announces his selection, ranging from simple daggers to more substantial short and long swords. However, the first customer to approach ignores the weaponry entirely, eagerly demanding a serving of rockboard jerky instead. He pauses for a heartbeat, a flicker of surprise crossing his features as he realizes where the true interest lies. Quickly recovering, he apologizes for the delay and confirms that he does indeed have smoked goods available. He completes his first sale of the day, exchanging a jar of smoked jerky for 8 silver coins, while noting to himself that his other work seems to be taking a backseat. Even when he attempts to pivot back to his primary trade, offering spears or katanas to the next person in line, the response is the same. The customer dismisses the offer of steel, insisting instead on 2 packs of smoked jerky and a portion of smoked powder. A new face, a man with a sturdy build and a traveling cloak, steps forward with an air of intense anticipation. He greets the blacksmith and practically vibrates with excitement at the prospect of finally tasting what he calls the legendary smoked meat, watching intently as a jar is prepared for him. Upon taking his first bite, the traveler is visibly overcome, describing how the savory flavor seems to intensify with every chew. He explains that rumors of these incredible smoked goods being sold at the free market had reached his ears, and the reality has far exceeded his expectations. The man reveals his identity as a traveling merchant who specializes in only the finest gourmet foods. Looking back at the growing queue, he observes with a mix of professional respect and amusement that every single person in line is there for the smoked delicacies, leaving the masterfully forged weapons largely ignored. He and the rest of the crowd clamor for the legendary smoked meats, their voices a chaotic chorus of demands for nuts and jars of jerky. Ag, caught in the middle of the frenzy, desperately tries to maintain order, reminding the eager patrons that his establishment is primarily a blacksmith shop, not a smokehouse. As the sun begins to set, the bustling crowd thins out, leaving behind a bittersweet reality. While every scrap of smoked food has been purchased, the rack of finely crafted swords remains untouched. A simple wooden sign now stands as a testament to the day's lopsided success, declaring the food sold out while the katanas wait in silence. The gleaming blades, products of countless hours of labor, sit neglected on the wooden counter. Eiji gazes at them with a heavy heart, the financial success of his side business doing little to soothe the sting of his primary craft being ignored. He sits alone under the dim light of his stall, the quiet of the evening amplifying his inner conflict. Despite the profit in his pocket, he finds it impossible to feel truly satisfied when his passion for smithing seems to have been eclipsed by a mere culinary hobby. The silence is suddenly broken by the approach of a new figure, prompting Eiji to reflexively offer his now standard apology about the lack of smoked goods. However, the visitor stops him mid-sentence, clarifying that food was never his objective. This newcomer possesses a striking, almost otherworldly presence, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the frantic energy of the earlier crowd. Eiji is momentarily stunned, his breath catching as he senses an intensity in the man's gaze that he hasn't encountered before. The stranger offers a knowing smile, acknowledging the peculiar situation Eiji finds himself in. He notes with a hint of amusement that he must be the first person all day who hasn't come seeking a snack, recognizing the blacksmith's obvious frustration. Revealing his origins from the Far East, the man gestures toward the display and asks to examine the weaponry. Eiji's eyes widen in surprise as the traveler specifically mentions katanas, a term rarely heard in these parts, suggesting a deep familiarity with the craft. With a renewed sense of purpose, Eiji carefully selects one of his creations and hands it over. The stranger accepts the blade with a polite word of thanks, his hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who knows the weight and balance of a true weapon. Holding the katana before him, the man lets out a long, appreciative breath, the tension in the air finally beginning to settle. For the first time that day, Eiji's work is being judged not by its flavor, but by the quality of its steel. He stands with a quiet dignity, his hands firmly but respectfully gripping the hilt of the blade. Eiji watches him, feeling a sudden urge to straighten his posture under the weight of the man's presence. His gaze is unwavering as he prepares to inspect the weapon, making the young smith feel as though his very soul as a craftsman is being put to the test by someone from the sword's true homeland. As he begins to unsheath the steel, a sudden, cold shiver runs down the young man's spine, the air itself seemingly sharpening in anticipation of the blade's reveal. He examines the edge with a practiced eye, eventually breaking the silence to ask if Eiji is truly satisfied with the result. Eiji explains that his decision to set up shop here was driven by rumors of another smith who made katanas, a gamble that seems to have been the right call. He confesses his utter astonishment, admitting that he never expected a blade forged in the kingdom to rival the masterworks of the Far East. The young smith notes the contradiction between the man's casual speech and the incredibly delicate, reverent way he handles the steel, treating it with more care than his words suggest. He declares the katana a top-tier masterpiece, the kind of work that would be considered a rarity even in the lands where such weapons were born. Surprised by the gravity of the praise, Eiji can only offer a simple acknowledgement, prompting the traveler to wonder if the young smith even understands the magnitude of his own achievement. The man is visibly taken aback when the smith admits he has rarely seen a genuine katana from the Far East, questioning how such skill could exist without extensive exposure to the original craft. He listens as the young man reveals the truth. His mastery wasn't found in a distant land, but passed down from his father, whom he strives to reach in skill. When the traveler asks if his father hailed from the Far East, the youth confirms the connection, acknowledging his heritage. He then speaks a name that carries the weight of legend, Ardlug, a smith of renowned skill from the Far East, and asks if the youth recognizes the man who might hold the key to his lineage. The traveler pauses, his gaze distant as he considers a name. He muses that if they are discussing someone who surpasses even the legendary smith Ardlug, only one individual comes to mind. Standing before the humble stall, he confirms that such a person does indeed exist, though he remains cryptic about their identity. Sensing he may have said too much, he quickly dismisses the thought as mere speculation, urging that they leave the matter alone. However, the young smith is not so easily deterred, his interest piqued by the mention of someone so skilled. He leans in, his voice firm with a desperate need for answers, declaring that he wants to know everything possible about his father. The traveler relents slightly, acknowledging that even speculation might hold value for the boy. With a calm, knowing smile, the merchant holds the finely crafted blade, cautioning that even with the young man's urgency, he cannot provide definitive information just yet. He gently returns the katana to its owner, suggesting they set aside the heavy topic of family for a moment to discuss a more practical matter, business. They formalize their meeting with a proper introduction. The traveler reveals himself as Ibuki Murasame, a merchant from the distant Far East, while the young man reaffirms his identity as Sig, the swordsmith. Having established their roles, Ibuki makes a direct proposal, asking if Sig would be willing to sell the swords he creates so they might be distributed throughout the kingdom. The young smith questions the logic, wondering why a merchant from the Far East wouldn't simply source blades from his own homeland. Ibuki explains the cold reality of trade. By being the sole provider of such quality here, he can monopolize the market and ensure a high profit. He elaborates on the political hurdles, noting that the most skilled smiths in the East are under the strict control of the shogunate or powerful daimyos, making their work nearly impossible for a lone merchant to acquire. Instead, he sees a rare opportunity in the skilled smith standing right before him and repeats his offer. He continues the negotiation with a surprising offer, presenting 200 gold coins for the purchase of the blades. Eiji is momentarily stunned by the high price, but the merchant remains calm, noting that a man of his culture would never treat such fine work poorly. The merchant's refusal to bargain further catches the young smith off guard, as he expected a more aggressive negotiation. Instead, the traveler explains with a serene smile that devaluing the price would only serve to devalue the craftsman's skill, a tactic that leaves a deep impression on his new partner. Reaching into his belongings, he produces a heavy, ornate sack filled with the promised currency, explaining that his trade in exotic goods from the Far East has been quite lucrative. He acknowledges the smith's undeniable talent, expressing genuine curiosity as to why such skill hasn't yet made him famous throughout the city. As they walk through the bustling market, the traveler shares a bit of his history, mentioning his 15-year absence and his previous role as an exclusive blacksmith for a guild in Rusalka. The conversation flows easily, bridging the gap between their two worlds as they discuss the passage of time and the nature of their respective crafts. The merchant then places a substantial order for the future, requesting 3 daggers, kitchen knives, and even a katana, all to be completed within a fortnight. Eiji accepts the challenge without hesitation, though he privately wonders if the man can truly move such a large inventory so quickly. With a final, cheerful wave, the businessman departs, leaving the young smith to reflect on the encounter. He realizes that his initial anxieties about dealing with a professional were entirely unnecessary, as the man's expertise in commerce is as sharp as the blades he seeks to sell. Shortly after the merchant's departure, the massive frame of Garland appears, his booming voice cutting through the air as he inquires about the day's business. He is eager to know if the swords found a buyer, his presence bringing a familiar, grounded energy to the forge. The young smith confirms the successful sale, prompting the veteran to ask if the buyer was a man named Ibuki. It becomes clear that the connection was not a matter of chance, but rather a deliberate recommendation from a trusted friend. Realizing the role his friend played in the transaction, Eiji expresses his gratitude for the introduction to such a valuable contact. The conversation shifts to more mundane matters as the large man asks after some smoked goods, only to be disappointed when he learns the stock is currently depleted. Despite the lack of smoked meats, the veteran reaches out with a small gift of his own, offering a piece of smoked cheese as a token of appreciation. He is glad to have helped facilitate the partnership, reinforcing the bonds of community that sustain them all. He stands by the stall, gesturing broadly as he speaks to the young blacksmith about the day's events. The atmosphere is light, the weight of the successful transaction still lingering in the air. The older man is greeted with a look of pure shock when Eiji connects him to the local rumors of a legendary smokehouse master. He simply laughs, clearly enjoying the recognition and the confusion on the youth's face. Continuing his hearty laughter, he confesses to being the very source of those rumors, pointing to himself with a mischievous glint in his eye. Eiji can hardly believe the man's audacity in orchestrating his own fame. Because of his clever self-promotion, business has been thriving, leading him to request that a dedicated wholesale batch of goods be set aside for his next visit. Eiji agrees, realizing the true scale of the partnership they have formed. As the day winds down in the bustling town square, the two part ways, leaving the young smith to reflect on the strange and profitable turns his life has taken. Back at his forge, he contemplates the new connection he has made with the merchant from the east. The prospect of a long-term arrangement feels like a significant step forward for his craft, and he resolves to meet the high expectations placed upon him. Elsewhere, under the cover of night, Ibuki walks through the quiet streets, his thoughts consumed by the weapon he now carries. He stops to inspect the blade, the moonlight catching the steel. He slowly draws the blade from its sheath, his eyes widening as he perceives a quality he didn't expect. The line of the steel is unlike anything he has seen before, possessing a clarity that borders on the supernatural. In the Far East, legends speak of blades so perfected they can reveal the future. As the light dances along the edge of this kingdom-made sword, those old stories feel suddenly, startlingly relevant. He pauses at the entrance of his lodgings, still stunned that such a masterpiece could have been forged by a simple smith within these borders. The realization of Eiji's true talent begins to settle in. He gazed at the steel, a sense of disbelief washing over him. To his eyes, the blade felt remarkably similar to those legendary weapons that attained the status of national treasures not through their history, but through the sheer, undeniable quality of the craftsmanship alone. He questioned his own senses, wondering if his imagination was playing tricks on him as he contemplated the impossible perfection before him. His hand trembled as he shielded his eyes from the metaphorical brilliance of the work, struck by the sheer weight of the talent required to forge such a thing. It was a masterpiece that inspired a primal fear within him, a testament to a skill so profound it felt dangerous. The realization of the smith's terrifying potential left him physically shaken, the weight of the discovery pressing down on his very soul. He focuses intently on the task at hand, his hands steady as he uses a fine chisel to engrave a Far Eastern inscription into the metal. After the painstaking process of filing, he moves to the next stage, knowing that a good polish is essential to bring out the blade's true character. Taking a moment to rest, he wipes the sweat from his brow and takes a long, refreshing drink of water. The simple clarity of the liquid makes him realize just how much he appreciates the pristine environment of his new home, a stark contrast to the life he left behind. Deciding it is time for a change of pace, he heads toward the back room to swap his work clothes for something more suitable for the outdoors. Though his usual gear is tucked away, he finds a set of sturdy traveling clothes that will serve him well enough for whatever the day brings. As he steps outside, he is greeted by the sudden appearance of a young hunter, Liliana, who seems slightly on edge after hearing a noise she mistook for a wild beast. He offers a calm apology for startling her, and she quickly shifts her focus to the sword he has been crafting, noting that the blade itself appears nearly complete. He explains that while the blade is indeed finished, the most arduous parts of the process, the fitting of the guard, collar, hilt, and scabbard, are still ahead. They share a brief moment of mutual respect for the craft, acknowledging that the most difficult projects are often the most rewarding to see through to the end. The young girl then reveals the true reason for her visit, explaining that she has managed to take down an exceptionally large catch and requires his strength to help transport it. Her eyes shine with a mix of pride and a polite request for assistance. He readily agrees, noting that he has reached a natural stopping point in his work and would welcome the change of scenery. She expresses her gratitude, and they make quick plans to head out together. Fully equipped and ready for the task, he takes one last look around his modest quarters before stepping out into the bright daylight. The weight of his gear feels familiar and grounding as he prepares to assist his friend. Upon reaching the site, he is struck by the sheer size of the deer Liliana has brought down, estimating it to be at least 8 years old. He praises her skill, but she humbly insists that it was the superior quality of the arrowheads he forged for her that allowed her to land such a clean, vital hit. He stands amidst the towering trees, instructing the young hunter on the proper way to preserve their prize. He explains that hanging the carcass from a high branch is essential to drain the blood properly. Otherwise, the meat's quality and flavor will suffer. Liliana listens intently, marveling at the depth of his practical knowledge. With a steady hand, he begins the delicate process of skinning the beast, the blade gliding smoothly through the hide. As they work, Liliana expresses a desire to sample the liver as sashimi, but he gently advises against it. Because the bleeding process was delayed, he explains that it is safer to discard the internal organs this time, a waste he acknowledges with a hint of regret. Looking toward the horizon, she inquires about their next move, noting the size of the hide. He suggests they take it to the lake to soak, despite the distance, and they agree to utilize a magic bag to ease the burden of transport. The distant mountain peaks stand silent under a vast, clear sky, marking the passage of time as they continue their labor. The sight of the water triggers a brief memory for him, a peaceful time of Natakeo and fishing with Sina, Lena, Thor, and Murasame. Liliana notices his sudden distraction and asks what has caught his attention, pulling him back to the present. She then asks if he would be willing to assist in gathering the rest of the meat the following day, promising a larger share of the harvest as a token of her gratitude. He readily agrees, assuring her of his support. Later, back at the settlement, he stands before the massive cuts of venison, impressed by their sheer size. He estimates that a single thigh cut must weigh at least 10 kilograms, a testament to the scale of their successful hunt. The meat is of exceptional quality, its marbled texture promising a rich and hearty feast for everyone involved. Recognizing the value of the find, they begin smoking the meat to ensure nothing is wasted. She watches the process with a focused, appreciative gaze. Eiji offers to smoke additional meat while he is already at it, noting that adding 1 or 2 more items to the smoker is not much extra work. Liliana is taken aback by his generosity, her eyes wide with surprise as she asks if he is truly certain about the offer. He ponders the various cuts available, the tenderloin, belly, shank, and thigh, considering which would benefit most from the smoke. Liliana watches him intently, asking for his expert recommendation on which of the 4 types he would suggest for this specific process. Holding a massive, heavy slab of meat, he explains that while the thigh is excellent for preservation, the tenderloin is particularly well-suited for processing. He decides to use the thigh meat for steaks and suggests turning the tenderloin into a high-quality smoked jerky, a choice that highlights his deep understanding of butchery. She reacts with pure, unbridled excitement, her face lighting up and her fists clenched in anticipation of such a delicacy. He simply tells her to leave the task to him and to look forward to the final result, confident in his ability to deliver. Now alone in his workspace and wearing a protective apron, he prepares to begin the first critical step of the preservation, the curing. He stands ready, focused on the task of transforming the raw harvest into a lasting food supply. He notes the unusual weight of the meat, which is heavier than typical livestock, as he begins mixing a large quantity of salt with brown sugar. This specialized curing salt is essential for drawing out moisture and infusing the meat with the first layer of flavor. He continues the process by seasoning the meat with onion and garlic powders, paprika, and pepper before sealing it away to rest in its own juices. The tenderloin will require 3 days of patience, while the denser thigh meat needs a full 5 days to properly cure. Once the allotted time has passed, he retrieves the slabs, observing that it is finally time to wash away the excess salt that has done its work. The meat has changed texture, becoming firmer and more concentrated. He meticulously removes the surface moisture, a step he knows is vital for determining the final flavor and ensuring the smoke adheres correctly. Finally, he exposes the meat to the steady, aromatic flow of the smoker, beginning the final transformation. As the smoking concludes, the meat takes on a deep, rich hue that is visually stunning. Watching the transformation, Liliana finds her appetite growing just from the sight of the beautifully preserved and aromatic harvest. She had left the meat in his capable hands, and now the young blacksmith stood alone in his kitchen, admiring the hanging cuts. To him, even the slow passage of time required for such a craft felt like a luxury befitting the era. He carefully inspected a strip of the finished jerky, noting that the process was finally complete. Upon tasting it, he found that the natural wildness of the venison had been perfectly mellowed by the smoke without losing its distinct character, a flavor he knew would pair excellently with a strong beer or whiskey later. He hoisted a much larger piece of cured meat a few days later, marveling at its impressive weight. This particular cut had also turned out exceptionally well, its surface firm and seasoned to perfection. The craftsman looked out toward the village, deciding it was finally time to share the fruits of his labor with the young hunter and her family. She burst through the door moments later, her nose twitching as the savory scent of smoke filled the air. Recognizing the aroma immediately, she called out to him, and he confirmed with a smile that the promised venison was ready at last. He offered her a piece of the tenderloin jerky, instructing her to tear it along the grain to fully appreciate the texture. As she took her first bite, her eyes widened in pure amazement at the concentrated, savory flavor. The young girl and her companion were soon lost in the experience, declaring the meat to be rich and full of punch. Watching their enthusiastic reaction, he couldn't help but joke that they were both destined to become quite the connoisseurs of fine spirits when they grew older. He then suggested that they all sit down for a proper meal together, proposing that they supplement the jerky with some of the succulent thigh meat for lunch. The invitation was met with immediate and joyful agreement, though they realized they hadn't even started on the main course yet. The kitchen became a hive of activity as he set to work preparing the feast while the young hunter watched with anticipation. The room was filled with the comforting sounds of cooking and the lingering, delicious scent of the hearth. Their gathering was soon joined by the lady of the house, who returned home to find the kitchen filled with the mouth-watering aroma of the smoked meat. She greeted them warmly, her presence completing the small circle as they prepared to enjoy the results of the long preservation process. She listens as her daughter explains that the young man has brought over the venison he spent time smoking. The mother offers her sincere thanks, though the youth humbly insists that he is the one who feels indebted to their kindness. Seeing her mother standing, the young hunter gently insists that she take a seat and relax while the final preparations are made. With a soft smile, the woman agrees, moving to join the others at the table. He begins to slice into the large cut of meat, revealing a stunning contrast between the firm, dark exterior and the moist, vibrant pink center. The girl watches in awe, remarking on how beautiful the cross-section looks and noting the skill required to keep the interior so perfectly rare. The glistening meat sits ready, its surface catching the light in a way that makes his mouth water. He can't help but feel a surge of anticipation, glad that he arrived with a hearty appetite for the feast ahead. As he continues his work, the rich, smoky aroma fills the room, heightening the hunger of everyone present. He observes that the medium-rare doneness is exactly what's needed to maximize the venison's natural juiciness, while the girls busily arrange the side dishes and plates. Moments later, the table is fully prepared, featuring the sliced venison as the centerpiece alongside carefully arranged place settings and glasses of water. The simple wooden table has been transformed into a scene of rustic elegance. They all take their places, the atmosphere filled with a sense of shared warmth and gratitude. The mother marvels at the luxury of such a meal, and with a collective nod of agreement, the young man invites everyone to begin eating. Upon taking her first bite, the woman is immediately struck by the sophisticated, gamey flavor, describing it as a truly mature and delicious experience. Her daughter agrees, noticing how the umami seems concentrated in every morsel, a sign of the careful curing process. He experiences the same sensation as he bites into a piece, feeling the robust juices burst forth from the lean, firm meat of the deer thigh. It is exactly the result he had hoped for, a perfect harmony of texture and intense flavor. Even the accompanying carrots have been elevated, having been boiled carefully and then coated in the rendered deer fat. This technique enhances their natural sweetness, rounding out the meal with a subtle, buttery finish. The fresh cabbage serves a purpose, cutting through the richness of the meat to keep every bite tasting as fresh as the first. While savoring the results of their labor, the young woman beams with pride, noting that the side vegetables are delicious because of the effort she put into cultivating them. Eiji acknowledges her hard work, realizing the meal is a collaborative triumph. This synergy between their efforts, the deer Liliana brought down, the meat Eiji smoked, and the vegetables Sina grew, narrows the gap between their daily survival and the comfort of a true home. They sit together in the warmth of the dining room, caught in a rhythmic cycle of hunting, preparing, eating, and working that slowly begins to define their lives. The reach of their work extends further, as even the surplus cabbage, harvested with care and sold to others, carries a piece of their labor into the lives of those beyond their walls. As the meal concludes, the mother expresses her gratitude to Eiji for the consistently excellent smoked meat he provides for their table. Liliana then approaches him, hesitating slightly before mentioning that while the food is wonderful, there is something else she requires his skills for. She clarifies that her request isn't for more smoked meat this time, but rather for 20 new arrowheads to replenish her quiver. He listens intently, processing the shift from culinary needs to the tools of her trade. He agrees, suggesting that if she has any old, used arrowheads, he can recycle the metal as base material to keep the cost of the new ones down. She looks surprised but pleased by the practical solution. This marks a new phase of cooperation, as Eiji balances his time between farming with the Shinshia family, forging tools for Liliana, and crafting specialized items for Ibuki to sell at the free market. He stands amidst the bustling market, the day of his promise to Ibuki having arrived with startling speed. Looking around at the vibrant stalls, he notes the heavy traffic toward the vendors of smoked goods and weapons, wondering how his own wares will fare in the crowd. Nearby, the exchange of goods is constant, with jars of preserved items and cuts of meat changing hands as the villagers prepare for the days ahead. Watching the flow of customers, he can't help but imagine a world where every passerby sought out his craftsmanship with the same fervor, a true dream for any dedicated smith. His reverie is interrupted by the arrival of Ibuki, who observes the busy atmosphere and assumes business has been thriving. He quickly corrects the traveler, explaining that the crowds were drawn by the smoked goods rather than his own blades. The traveler is genuinely shocked, finding it hard to believe that a smith of such caliber didn't manage a single sale despite the high volume of potential buyers. In response to the disappointing news, Ibuki jokingly suggests that perhaps a career change to the smoked goods trade is in order, before revealing that the specific items Eiji ordered are finally ready for inspection. As he examines the new work, the traveler notes a significant leap in quality compared to their previous transaction. He questions if the smith had been holding back before, but the young man explains that his true strength lies in custom orders, where he can visualize the person who will eventually wield the blade. Impressed by the craftsmanship, Ibuki insists on raising the purchase price to 300 gold coins, acknowledging that the superior quality demands a higher value. He then shares news of the previous sword, mentioning that it found a buyer who was so enamored with the piece that they even had it custom colored. With a confident smile, the merchant asserts that the quality of the work is so high that any trader unable to turn a profit with it has no business in the profession. The young smith can only watch in silent admiration, struck by the traveler's unwavering poise and professional conviction. The young blacksmith stands behind his stall as the traveler from the far east examines the blades on display. The traveler remarks that with such high quality, a merchant wouldn't be able to make much profit, suggesting it might be better to quit while ahead. He then presents a surprisingly thick stack of papers, handing them over with a warning that this is the next batch of requests. The blacksmith stares at the pile, his eyes widening at the sheer volume of work ahead. Looking over the current inventory, the traveler marvels at the impressive quantity of finished goods already prepared. As the traveler admires the work, the blacksmith admits that while the orders are numerous this time, he's unsure if he can maintain this pace indefinitely. He explains that if he focuses solely on these requests, his research time and daily life in the village will suffer, making it difficult to balance everything. Hearing this, he listens as the traveler suggests a practical solution, delegating the peripheral tasks to other craftsmen or perhaps letting apprentices handle the simpler parts of the process. The blacksmith looks up in confusion, clarifying that there are no other craftsmen in his workshop, nor does he have any apprentices to assist him. He watches as the traveler is left momentarily speechless, his eyes wide with shock as he stares at the lone smith. He continues, explaining that typically, sword making is a collaborative effort involving specialized hilt and scabbard makers, or at the very least, a master working alongside several apprentices to share the burden. The blacksmith confirms that he handles every single step of the process himself. The traveler notes that while division of labor makes the work easier, it requires everyone involved to possess a similar level of skill and rhythm, which is incredibly rare and difficult to achieve. He blinks in confusion, the revelation about specialized craftsmen catching him completely off guard. As the traveler explains that in the Far East, separate masters handle the blade, the hilt, and the scabbard, the young smith listens intently, realizing how different his own upbringing was. He reflects on his father, who performed every single step of the process alone, never once suggesting that others should be involved. The traveler can only marvel at such a Spartan approach to the craft. This realization settles heavily on him. His father wasn't just a teacher, but an anomaly whose standards were far beyond the ordinary. Standing before the forge, he looks at his own hands and the sheer volume of work ahead, acknowledging that while he has dedicated himself to this path, the workload he carries would be deemed impossible by any standard guild. Outside the workshop, the exchange of goods concludes as the traveler prepares to depart with the newly forged blades, their quality already speaking for itself. Closing his ledger with a sharp snap, the man in the kimono inquires if there are any further commissions to be recorded before he moves on. The merchant expresses his gratitude, noting that these pieces will keep him busy for some time and promising to reach out when the next shipment is required. Just as the conversation seems to end, a sudden thought strikes the young smith, prompting him to ask a question that has been lingering in the back of his mind. He looks toward the traveler and asks for clarification regarding the guild in Lasarka, wondering if it truly held the prestigious S-rank status he had heard of. He stood in the middle of the bustling market, the echoes of a strange rumor still ringing in his ears and leaving him with more questions than answers. He watched as the mysterious traveler from the Far East turned to leave, offering a polite farewell and a wave, leaving the young blacksmith to wonder about the true nature of their brief encounter. Returning to his stall, he looked down at his tools and the ledger, realizing that despite his father's unconventional teachings, there was still a vast world of knowledge and technique beyond his current reach. His moment of quiet reflection was suddenly shattered by a boisterous shout as two familiar figures came charging through the crowd, their voices carrying across the marketplace. The source of the commotion was Thor, accompanied by Liliana, who waved frantically as he spotted the young blacksmith. His face lit up with the excitement of a long-awaited reunion. Before a proper greeting could be exchanged, Thor instructed Liliana to keep watch at the stall while he dashed off to find someone he referred to as his sister, leaving the blacksmith bewildered by the sudden energy. While they waited, Liliana recounted their recent hunt, explaining how the dagger he had crafted allowed them to effortlessly take down a black boar, a D-rank monster that had previously been an impossible foe for them to defeat. Thor returned, beaming with pride as he insisted that their victory was entirely due to the exceptional quality of the blade, though the blacksmith remained humble, attributing the success to their own growing skills. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a striking woman with a commanding presence, who immediately took offense at Thor's informal greeting and demanded to be addressed as Rose. She leaned in close, her sharp eyes scrutinizing him as she questioned if he was truly the one responsible for such a masterfully forged weapon, noting that his ability to create such a fine blade was highly unusual for a simple blacksmith. She laughs, noting that while he claims to have only learned the basics, his craftsmanship is so superior it makes other blacksmiths look pitiful. Hearing this, the two young hunters exchange stunned glances, wondering if the man before them is truly just a common blacksmith or something far more significant. Turning back to her companions, she dismisses them with a sharp command to study their lessons later, leaving the young blacksmith blinking in confusion at her sudden shift in tone. Without missing a beat, she leans in and demands that he sell her a dagger as well, her eyes fixed on the quality of his work. He agrees readily, setting the price at 30 silver coins. When the young boy gasps at the cost, the smith explains that a traveler from the east recently advised him that his previous prices were far too low for such quality. Inspired by her leader's decision, the young girl decides to purchase one for herself as well, carefully taking the finely crafted blade from his hand. With their business concluded, the trio waves a cheerful farewell, their voices fading as they disappear into the bustling market streets. Left alone at his stall, he sighs, noting the lack of other customers and deciding it might be best to close up early to restock his own supplies of food and spices. As he begins to pack, his gaze drifts toward a small figure standing nearby, watching him with quiet curiosity. The young girl with pigtails lingers by the display, her eyes fixed on the remaining daggers while he pauses, box in hand, to acknowledge her presence. She approaches with wide-eyed enthusiasm, practically vibrating with excitement as she asks to see the dagger. Caught off guard by her sudden intensity, he hands it over, watching as she notes his sturdy build and identifies him as a fellow member of the crafting trade, specifically noting his resemblance to the dwarf tribe's artisans. Examining the blade with a professional's eye, she mutters about the exquisite quality of the edge, her fascination growing with every second. The craftsmanship is so impressive that she immediately asks to see his sword as well, a request he grants with a simple, quiet nod. Overjoyed by his permission, she lets out a loud, grateful shout that rings through the market stall. He stands by patiently, though a bit overwhelmed by her boundless energy as she prepares to inspect his primary weapon. As she slowly draws the blade from its sheath, the polished steel catches the light, casting a sharp reflection in her dilated pupils. The weight and balance of the weapon seem to speak to her on a level that transcends mere utility. The sheer perfection of the sword's construction sends a shock through her, causing her face to flush a deep crimson. She begins to describe the blade's beauty in disturbingly provocative terms, leaving him standing there in stunned, awkward silence. She continues to stroke the metal with a look of pure ecstasy, making strange, breathy noises that draw curious glances from passersby. He watches her with increasing alarm, unable to comprehend why his handiwork is eliciting such an intensely visceral reaction. Deciding that things have gone far enough, he abruptly snatches the sword back and sheathes it, calling her out for her bizarre and perverted behavior. She is left reeling from the sudden loss of the blade, her hands still reaching out for the steel. Desperate for just one more look, she begins to plead with him in the middle of the street, begging to see even just the tip of the sword again. Her loud, public entreaties start to attract a crowd, much to his growing embarrassment. Fearing that her antics will cause a scene and bring trouble to Garland, he finally relents, agreeing to let her see it one last time if she promises to stay quiet. Her face instantly transforms into a mask of pure, unadulterated joy as she cheers at her small victory. He hands the weapon over with a stern, final warning. She is to keep her expressions neutral and, above all, refrain from making any more of those unsettling noises. She listens with rapt attention, though her eyes remain fixed hungrily on the hilt. He holds the blade steady, but the mere sight of it sends the young dwarf into a state of near delirium. Her eyes sparkle with an intense, star-like light as she clasps her hands together, her face flushed with a deep crimson. Steam seems to rise from her very skin as she struggles to contain her overwhelming excitement, breathlessly promising to handle the situation with the utmost care. Nearby, Rose watches the display with a look of sheer bewilderment, questioning if the girl is even mentally stable enough for the task. Rose takes the blade in her hands, her eyes widening as she feels the weight and balance. Eiji watches her closely, noting the way her hands move along the scabbard with a practiced, almost reverent touch. He feels a sense of unease, wondering if her intense reaction is merely his imagination or something more. She draws the steel slightly, her gaze fixed on the metal. She notes that this isn't just any ordinary blade. The color of the edge and the spine are distinctly different, a feat of craftsmanship that leaves her questioning how such a thing is possible. Eiji remains silent, observing the warrior's growing fascination. Her breath hitches, a soft sound escaping her lips as she stares at the shimmering surface. She is completely enthralled, her face flushed with an intensity that suggests she is seeing something far beyond a simple weapon. Eiji notices her labored breathing and realizes she is looking at his work with a level of seriousness he hadn't expected. 10 minutes pass in a heavy silence, the only sound being the distant bustle of the town. He stands patiently as she continues her silent vigil over the blade, her concentration never wavering for a single moment. Finally, she sheaths the weapon and holds it out to him with both hands. She offers her sincere thanks as she returns the blade, but her expression remains grave. She then admits that she has a significant request to make of him. Without warning, she drops into a deep bow, her voice ringing out with sudden desperation. She pleads with him to take her on as his disciple, a request that leaves him utterly stunned and speechless. He tries to stammer out a refusal, explaining that he has no intention of taking on a student. However, she refuses to budge, her posture remaining rigid as she begs him to reconsider, her determination clear in every line of her body. The situation escalates as she drops to the ground in a full prostration, right in the middle of the thoroughfare. She shouts that she doesn't care what he does with her, even offering her own body if it means he will teach her. He panics, desperately trying to get her to stop before they draw a crowd with such a scandalous display. Realizing she won't be swayed, he finally sighs and tells her to raise her head, agreeing to listen. She looks up with a radiant, triumphant smile, her joy contrasting sharply with his own sense of exhaustion at her overwhelming intensity. She bows deeply, her voice thick with gratitude as she addresses him as master. He, however, remains hesitant, reminding her that he hasn't agreed to take on a disciple and doesn't even know who she is. In response to his query, she rises slightly to introduce herself as Nene, a member of the dwarf tribe. He reciprocates, identifying himself simply as Sig, the swordsmith. Curious about her motivations, he asks why she is so determined to study under him specifically. She doesn't hesitate, bowing once more and formally requesting his guidance. She begins to explain her unique circumstances, noting that while most dwarves practice their craft within family units, she has been assigned the role of a wanderer. He repeats the term, intrigued by the concept of a nomadic smith. Continuing her explanation, she describes how she left her settlement to travel the world, seeking out new knowledge and techniques to eventually bring back to her people. It is a mission of cultural preservation and growth. He finds her dedication fascinating but remains humble, suggesting that if she truly wants to master Far Eastern techniques, she should seek out a master in those lands rather than an amateur like himself. She quickly interjects, revealing that she has already visited the Far East and seen their blades, yet she firmly believes his skill surpasses even the masters she encountered there. He remains skeptical, suspecting that her praise might be a bit of an exaggeration. She doubles down on her assessment, insisting that his work is superior even to the renowned smiths who serve the great lords and generals of the Far East. Touched by her sincere high regard, he admits that he had been uncertain of his own standing and is genuinely pleased by her evaluation. However, he senses there is more to her request and asks for the primary reason she wishes to become his apprentice. Suddenly closing the distance between them, she declares with a flushed face and intense passion that his swords are erotic. He is left utterly bewildered, unable to comprehend how the creator of the blades could be so disconnected from such a scandalous interpretation of his work. He stands there, completely bewildered, as the woman continues her bizarre explanation. She insists that any man should understand why his swords are alluring, but he can only stare in disbelief, unable to grasp her logic regarding the supposed eroticism of cold steel. She leans in, her eyes sparkling with a strange fervor as she describes the blade's edge as having the perfect curve of a goddess. To her, the weight and balance are akin to a divine touch, a sentiment that only makes him break into a cold sweat, realizing he might be dealing with someone far more eccentric than he first imagined. As they walk through the village, the young blacksmith tries to process the situation, questioning why she would want to be his disciple when he has always worked in solitude. He explains that he has no other craftsmen or students under him, preferring the quiet focus of his own forge. Undeterred, she bows deeply, her voice filled with desperation as she begs him to reconsider. She promises to handle all the household chores and look after his daily needs, arguing that it is a waste for him to handle every single step of the process alone when she could be of such great assistance. He pauses, looking out over the workspace while considering the weight of her request. He admits that he might be a terrible teacher, but she counters immediately, asserting that a true disciple learns by observing the master's technique rather than through formal instruction. Her gaze becomes intensely focused, her face inches from his as she declares her absolute resolve to master the craft, even if it takes a decade. The sheer pressure of her determination leaves him reeling, his mind racing to find a way to handle such an earnest and overwhelming proposal. In the quiet of his own thoughts, he admits that the offer isn't necessarily a bad one, yet the prospect of taking on his first disciple fills him with a genuine sense of dread. He has never been responsible for another's growth, and the uncertainty of the path ahead weighs heavily on him. Nearby, Sino watches the exchange with a hint of concern, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Sensing his hesitation, Nene changes her approach, noting that she is aware of his one hobby outside of the forge, his appreciation for unique, smoked scents. She produces a collection of rare materials, her expression brightening as she offers them as a tribute. She presents bags of mango wood, coffee wood, and spice wood from the southern lands, hoping these exotic gifts will sway his heart and prove her dedication to his well-being. He looks down at the unfamiliar packages, intrigued despite himself by the prospect of scents he has never encountered. She points out a specific bag of sakura wood from the Far East, describing its fruity and elegant aroma, successfully piquing his curiosity and softening his resolve. He stares at the assortment of food, cured meats, sausages, a block of cheese, and a head of cabbage, imagining the rich, smoky flavors the rare woods would impart to such a feast. Turning his gaze back to the woman before him, he acknowledges the quality of the materials she has presented, realizing her dedication to becoming his student is genuine. With a resigned sigh, the young blacksmith finally relents, officially accepting her as his disciple. The news causes her eyes to light up with pure, unadulterated joy as she celebrates her success. She immediately seizes his hand in a firm, enthusiastic grip, shouting her thanks so loudly that it echoes through the market stalls as they finalize their new arrangement. As night falls over the quiet landscape, the warm glow of lanterns illuminates the sturdy wooden exterior of a combined home and workshop nestled in the darkness. Stepping inside the spacious interior, he welcomes her to his home and, noting the lateness of the hour, offers her a place to stay for the night, which she accepts with a polite bow and further gratitude. Her curiosity quickly shifts toward his professional space, and she asks for permission to inspect the forge. He agrees, noting that it is only natural for one of her craft to be drawn to the heart of the workshop. Upon entering the forge, she marvels at the heart of his craft, but the atmosphere is quickly punctured by little Lena, who stares in wide-eyed shock at the newcomer's bold and revealing attire. The young girl erupts in a fit of indignation, pointing an accusing finger and shouting that it is Nene's vulgar appearance that is the true problem, even going so far as to call it scandalous nakedness. Ignoring the commotion for a moment, he presents a prototype blade to his new apprentice, challenging her to look past the surface and tell him what she perceives within the steel. He leads her into a living space, suggesting they call it a night given the late hour. Stepping into a room furnished with simple beds, he offers her the space, apologizing for the clutter in the other parts of the house. She, however, insists on cleaning the area immediately, arguing that since she will be occupying it from tomorrow, she should take responsibility for its upkeep now. Because she is now his disciple, she explains with a firm nod that she intends to live here to properly attend to his needs. The concept of a live-in apprenticeship seems to catch him off guard. He voices his concern, questioning the propriety of a young woman sharing a home with a man she has only just met. She dismisses the worry with a bright smile, explaining that her own home is far on the outskirts of the village. The daily commute would be a significant drain on her training time, a loss she isn't willing to accept. Seeing her determination, he relents, promising to arrange a more suitable room for her in the future, even if it takes some effort to prepare. She beams with gratitude, vowing to put her full energy into the cleaning. The two of them set to work within the spacious, high-ceilinged room, beginning the process of turning the dusty storage area into a habitable living space. While she ties a cloth over her face to ward off the dust and scrubs the floor with intense focus, he returns carrying a heavy bundle of fresh bedding to ensure her comfort. Watching her work, he reflects on the duality of her nature. Though her obsession with blades borders on the eccentric, in every other aspect, she proves herself to be a remarkably diligent and earnest young woman. Once the task is complete and the room stands transformed, she celebrates their progress with a joyful leap. He can't help but feel that his once quiet home is about to become much more lively. Noticing her exhaustion, he suggests she take a hot bath to relax. She is momentarily stunned that his home even possesses such a luxury, but he simply gestures toward the small facility, insisting that his new guest take the first turn. He leads the way to the bathhouse, leaving her to enjoy the rare luxury. Inside, she begins her ablutions, scrubbing her skin with soap as steam fills the room. With a soft sigh of relief, she tests the temperature of the water with her foot before stepping in. She sinks into the large, tiled tub, the warmth of the water soothing her tired muscles after a long day of labor. Having finished her soak, she emerges from the bathhouse wearing only a thin towel and undergarments. The young blacksmith is caught off guard by her bold appearance, his face flushing as she playfully asks if he finds her provocative. He can only stammer in response, overwhelmed by her lack of modesty. As night falls over the quiet house, he attempts to find rest in his bed, but the silence is broken when she enters the room. She reminds him of what she had said earlier, her voice low and steady in the darkness. Without hesitation, she climbs onto the bed and pins him down, her gaze intense. She declares that if he truly intends to take her on as an apprentice, there are certain conditions she is willing to meet. Leaning in close until their faces are mere inches apart, she whispers that he is free to do whatever he wishes with her body. The blacksmith is left paralyzed with shock, his mind racing as he tries to process her sudden and extreme proposition.